Hey guys, welcome to a new video. Like, comment and subscribe if you enjoy. Without any further interruptions, enjoy the What If. Chapter 1. The Death of Masaki Kurosaki. A young boy, hair a unique shade of orange, wept underneath the corpse of the most important woman, or, for that matter, person, in his world. The sound muffled into her shoulder as he unconsciously huddled into the final comfort Masaki Kurosaki would be able to grant him. That was the day that Ichigo Kurosaki, the boy whose world lived and died with his mother, died. And, unknown to any besides the child himself, the day Ichigo Kurosaki, the human soul reaper, was born. 2 months later, the same child sat up with a scream. One of terror. His hands clasped on his head, and he shook, not paying any attention to the crimson liquid that stained them red. He had grown used to the guilt-formed gloves. Blood was on his hands, and the boy doubted that would ever change. How could he redeem himself, after all? He felt a pair of arms wrap around him, the only suitable occupant giving him comfort. While the remaining 3 looked on with varying degrees of emotion, though little was shown of the feelings that lay beneath their skin. One felt an all-consuming sadness that wasn't shown on his regal face, another hid his sympathy behind a half-hearted grin. The kid was strong, normally, but how was he meant to take his revenge in an 8-year-old's body? The final figure was not able to understand what was happening, but he could tell that, for some reason, his future wielder was upset. And, so, his crimson eyes glinted with anger and frustration as he could not find the cause in the gravity-defying city in which they resided. It must have still been about the female that perished. The one that was always on the boy's mind. The boy's shoulders shook as he sobbed into the kind lady's shoulder. Almost 7 years later, Ichigo Kurosaki stared unflinchingly at the long-haired Shinigami in front of him as his body moved without command. It was a sensation he remembered, something he had been shown years ago so that, in the case that it was necessary, he would not fight his partners for control. And so, when Zanjetsu, for he assumed it was the old man, moved him no more than a few millimeters to his left, he trusted the spirit implicitly. Even with the months he had gone without them. Ichigo was alive, there was no doubt in the minds of his observers of that, but he was weak. He was human, how could anything else be expected of him? For him to have any chance to save the girl he had grown inexplicably fond of, at least in the minds of 3 of his occupants, in the months prior. But that would be up to him. They could do nothing to help him from in here, and that was a fact that brought frustrated growls from 2 of the male spirits, a stony silence from the 3rd, and a sad sigh from the lone female in his mind. His accessible reserves of Raryoku, previously filled with solely Ichigo's sizable reserves and that from the imposter Zanpukto, was rapidly draining from the Soul Reaper Captain's strike. Their wielder would need to gain access to his latent death god abilities for the leak to be plugged. Hopefully, that would happen soon, or the storm would not stop any time in the foreseeable future. As Rukia Kuchiki, the Soul Reaper that more than one of the spirits blamed for this situation, looked back, she would be willing to swear that the amber eyes of her newly found human partner, looking after her, flashed a violent red before the orange-haired head dropped to the ground, the removal of his energy leaving Ichigo in an almost catatonic state. You see, spiritual pressure increases most quickly when the soul is in danger of termination. The fact that you dodged the first attack shows that you have restored your power. And, now that you have restored your spiritual power beautifully, what do you say we celebrate? How about we? The man was interrupted by an axe, wielded by the large form of Tessai, swinging down between Kazuki and Ichigo, severing the chain extended from the human soul's chest. Move on to lesson 2. 5 minutes later, the conversation had progressed rather far. Ichigo was lying, face down, on the ground with Tessai sat, at attention, on his back. And one more thing, your chain will erode from the point at which it was cut. If it reaches your chest, you will become a hollow. So what will it be? Will you become a Shinigami? Or will you become a hollow? Isn't it obvious? Ichigo asked with a slight grin. Let's get started. Very well. The bucket-hatted man pointed his fan off to the side. Go. The ground beneath the floored plus soul gave way, and the 2 affected fell, the depth of the hole given away by the panicked, drawn-out expletive from Ichigo Kurosaki. What the? Ichigo questioned, as he discovered metal rods had been bent around his arms, binding them behind his back. Forgive this arrogance. Tessai, the other in the shaft, said as he noted Ichigo had regained consciousness from the brief spell of his daze. But for the duration of this lesson, you are forbidden the use of your arms. Bakudo number 99, Kin. The groggy boy's arms locked behind his back, and he gave a surprised grunt. Ichigo, Urahara called from the top of the hole, peering down into the cavern below. At the bottom of the shattered shaft it will take 3 days for your chain to deteriorate. The boy at the bottom frowned in confusion. For this lesson, you're required to climb out without the use of your arms. So I'm able to access the powers of a death god now. He directed to Tessai, who nodded, rather solemnly. He must have been expecting Ichigo to fail, or at least preparing himself for that possibility. Oh, that's good. The orange-haired soul plopped down onto the ground, sitting cross-legged and closing his eyes. No, Ichigo, you need to climb out. Kazuki called down, humor in his tone. Kurosaki, he continued when the boy did not respond. Tessai, what's going on? I don't know, boss. He just asked if he could access the powers of a Shinigami now, then started meditating. The large man yelled up. Well, nudge him and wake him up. Will do, boss. Meanwhile, time had slowed for Ichigo. Though it was far from obvious from his point of view, the same as it always used to be when he appeared in the backwards world. Oi, old man Zanjetsu. He looked around in front of him. Ichigo, nay. Behind you, Ichigo. The older, Getsu's voice stated, prompting his wielder to spin around and face him, along with the others. Ah, it's good to see you all again, Ichigo said with a grin, in what would have been an odd occurrence outside of his inner world. But why hide your relief from people that could read your mind? How are you doing? We're as good as you are, Ichigo. Though the weather has been rather unpleasant since the female Kuchiki was taken. The oldest looking of them stated, speaking for the others, too. Happily, though, it has cleared up for now. Great, Ichigo nodded. Now, what do I need to do to get my powers instead of piggybacking Rukia's? You need to find your Zanpukto. Just the one. Now that didn't make sense. I don't understand, why would there just be one of you? It is symbolic, Ichigo. Finding the blade will be finding your Shinigami abilities. The time will come that you will have to convince each of us, in the case that you have yet to fulfill our criteria, properly of your abilities, for Bankai, of course, but that will not be now. Oh, okay, I understand. Ichigo nodded. So where will my sword be? And what are the rules regarding my finding it? It will be in a box somewhere on one of this world's buildings. The tall, black-dressed man pointed at one such skyscraper to emphasize his point. No rules. Just find the blade. Right. And who hid the blade? Why does that matter? Zanjetsu raised an eyebrow, wondering what his wielder meant exactly. Well, if it's you, then it will be in the last place I look, the whole, never give up, thing. Those watching knew that this wasn't meant to belittle the lesson, but that it was just Ichigo's nature to treat it casually. Ichigo, the name that made it easy to differentiate between the two Zanjetsus. Would just be the first place I looked and he'd be there to fight me before I could get it. Ah, I see your point. Zanjetsu responded. It wasn't hidden by any of us. It is simply there, a manifestation of a part of you, not something any of us can control. Okay, so it's a matter of my ability to sense that part of myself. The four nodded their confirmation. Then I'll get going. The orange-haired man turned to face an unoccupied region of his mindscape, and pulled up the memory of Ryu, the arrogant boy from his class. What had he said? Shinigami's soul ribbons were red. There. He gripped the ribbon and yanked on the scarlet fabric in one quick motion. Oddly, he felt himself soar forwards instead of the box coming to him. Following the path, Ichigo channeled his Reiatsu into his feet, and vanished in a burst of speed, the technique that Shinigami called flash step. The four figures stayed still in their places, waiting for Ichigo to return. The same thought ran through their minds. Well, the same vague thought. Finally, I'm going to be wielded. Ichigo returned in a slight flash. He had been gone for no more than 30 seconds, far faster than could be expected. Impressive as always, Ichigo. The female occupant commented with a smile. Not that I find that surprising. We know you better than that by now, after all. Thank you, Nejibana. Chapter 2 Ichigo returns. Tessai, the former captain of the Kido Corps, exiled Shinigami, and worker at Urahara's shop, was poking the downed Kurosaki with the toes of his boot. The boy still wasn't reacting, though, surprising, since the large man had been nudging him for the past 5 minutes. It was almost like Ichigo was in Jinzi. A hand lashed out, and grabbed the big man's leg, before its owner stood up and, with a twist of his body, threw the Kido master upwards, and out of the pit. A high-pitched scream accompanying the large man's flight. What the, Tessai? Jinta wondered aloud. How had that happened? All that was in there with him was a plus soul. This thought was forcibly confirmed to be incorrect as a voice spoke from behind he, Ururu and Urahara. Was the shaft really necessary, Urahara? A fist slammed into the back of the blonde's head, and he flew forward. The exile let out a panicked yell, which was quickly cut off as he, face first, collided with the wall of the shattered shaft. Darn, he uttered as he fell back, and down into the depths of the hole. Then, the shop owner was suddenly climbing out of the hole, having flashed up to the edge while out of the now Shinigami's sight. Well, that was an impressive punch, Kurosaki-san. And I'm guessing from your attire that you have managed your task. This must be some kind of record. The bucket-hatted man grinned at his self-named apprentice. Shall we begin lesson 3? He peered at the Zanpukto that was, once again, taking up the majority of Ichigo's back. Or, more accurately, the sheath of the unnamed sword was. Fine. What's this lesson? Simple. Knock the hat off my head. He tapped the rim to reinforce the goal. And, begin. The boy drew his blade, and scowled when he noticed that the sword was still only a fraction of the length it had been previously. The quiet captain had snapped it when he and Pineapple Head came to kidnap Rukia. Oh, well, I don't imagine that it's a good idea to release so near the 2 kids. He commented to himself, and the others that could hear his thoughts. I'll have to make do. Hopefully, since it's just knocking the hat off, I'll be able to accomplish it with the hilt. He blurred forwards, in an impressive show of speed, and swung the broken blade at his opponent, aiming for his head and the hat resting on said man's scalp. But the eccentric man had moved, and his blade swished past his ear. Kazuki, complete with a grin, took a hold of his cane and it separated into 2 parts. One, the far more worrying, was a shining blade, while he dropped the other, the disguised sheath, to the floor. I thought only Zanpukto could harm Soul Reapers. Ichigo pointed out, eyeing the thin blade. What do you hope to achieve with that? Oh, I didn't expect you to remember that tidbit just yet, Kurosaki-san. Well, since you've asked. Awaken, Benaheim. The blade smoothed out and transformed into a medium-sized, elegant blade with a slightly curved hilt and a crimson tassel dangling from the base. Ichigo huffed slightly. Doesn't give away much about its capabilities, that. The boy scowled. Then his face turned to one of confusion when he noticed the pressure of the man's Reiatsu. Hang on, how are those 2 not being crushed by your pressure? Releasing should have hurt them, at least. Ah, you don't really think I'd miss something so vital when I build my training area, do you, Kurosaki-san? I'm insulted. He gave a rather pathetic pout. You seem like a bit of a dumbass to me, so yeah. The teen shrugged, followed by a cloud appearing over the older man. But that's good, at least. I can see what I'm capable of out here. He readjusted his grip on the large hilt. Any of you particularly want to take this guy? He asked the residents of his mind. You gonna kill him? Ichigo questioned. No, maim. No, then don't waste my time. The hollow went back to doing whatever he did when Ichigo wasn't paying attention. The human was a bit wary to ask what exactly that was. Following the sadistic spirit's hope of violence, Nejibana and the old man responded without any particular care either way. Neither had any particular bloodthirst, unless their wielder was harmed, that is. Lastly, he heard a growl that could be taken either way, but had a general feel of anger and anticipation. Ichigo tended to understand his last Zanpukto, and so assumed he had understood the spirit this time, too. The orange-haired Shinigami brought the remnants of his oversized blade to his left arm, and pressed it against his skin. Savage. He ran the blade down his flesh, bringing forth blood that ran down his arm. Tabigarasu. And a torrent of blue Reiatsu hid Ichigo from those watching's view. When he was uncovered, it left Urahara confused. What he saw was far from the norm for a Shikai form. Instead of the blade repairing itself and changing into a more obvious, and unique, weapon, there were two katanas, one being quite a bit longer than the average and the other a more traditional length, and a single wakizashi now rested on Ichigo's hips. While the orange-haired boy was dressed in a sleeveless kimono. While the attire was not weird. Having such plain blades for a Shikai was rather ineffective. Where's your Shikai? It cannot be those katanas, can it? The ex-captain queried. He must be missing something. Right here, Ichigo stated, raising his hands. The captain was even more confused. He really shouldn't have missed that. Those gauntlets were rather obvious. The crimson clawed hands extended to cover his forearms up to the elbow, showing defensive capabilities, and had small distortions, implying that it had been molded onto the forearms. Underneath and hastily dried. That suggestion was true, as Tabigarasu had taken a form he believed to be pleasant to Ichigo, and ended up taking the unfortunate metaphor of guilt that had since passed. Ichigo was actually quite fond of the weapon now. It allowed him greater freedom than the other Shikais, yet did not sacrifice fighting ability. Destructive capacity and elegance, for sure, but not fighting ability. The human-turned Shinigami darted forward with a burst of unrefined shunpo and appeared in front of Urahara, swinging his, now clenched, fist in an uppercut aimed at the older man's chin. Urahara leapt back, avoiding the attack easily enough, and observed as a ball of what looked to be wind shot up before fizzing out a little before the top of the cavern. Sing, Benaheim, Urahara announced, and a wave of crimson energy shot towards Ichigo. It was weakened, of course, to reduce the damage that Kazuki expected when it hit. He did not believe that Ichigo knew any speed techniques, after all. So, he missed it when his opponent Flash stepped behind him, and entirely missed the same boy drawing back his left fist and jabbing the blonde in his kidneys. He, too, reduced the force as he punched out at the man, and so the ex-Shinigami was only thrown forward a little bit. Oof. Urahara grunted at the impact, but quickly climbed back to his feet once he stopped rolling. Impressive, Kurosaki-san, but my hat is still on. You will have to do better than that to remove it. The bucket hat had, indeed, somehow remained on his head. Sorry about that. Ichigo shot forwards, in another burst of speed, and swung again, this time aiming for Kazuki's head, in a punch that would have knocked the hat clean off his head, had the ex-captain not known shunpo too. This time, the semi-transparent ball crashed into a medium-sized rock and split it into two equal pieces. Spinning, Ichigo raised his arm just in time to block a blow from Benaheim to his side, the ramrod straight blade bouncing off his raised right arm, just as his left fist struck its wielder in the stomach in a stronger blow that threw him a half-dozen feet into the air, allowing Ichigo to capitalize on the opportunity by swiping his fist again and catching the falling man on the head, smashing it, along with the rest of his body, into the rocky terrain below their feet. As the man lay in a slight slump, not unconscious, but dazed, Ichigo leant down and plucked the hat off his head, leaping back as the other fighter rose to his feet unsteadily and gave a strained, wheezy chuckle. Well done, Kurosaki. That was good. Very good. He waddled over to the human boy holding his hat, and the orange-haired newly Shinigami handed it back to him. May I ask how you seem so experienced already? By my reckoning you've had no training at all, other than the brawling you were well known to partake in, but I doubt that would teach you to use shunpo. Not training exactly, but I've been talking with my Zanpukutos for 7 years, I think, now. I sparred with them sometimes, and that helped teach me to fight with them. Ichigo explained, with a shrug, not realizing that this was abnormal, simply because he had no frame of reference. Hang on, are you saying you have more than one? And how on earth did you speak with them while you were still human? The shopkeeper exclaimed, losing his composure. Briefly. Yeah, I have 3. And I just went into my world while I was asleep. 3, well, 3.5, maybe. One has 2 swords. Technically, not a lie. Zangetsu did have 2 blades. Wow, Kazuki said, before muttering. You're a scary kid, aren't you, Ichigo? His instincts were telling him to study the teen in front of him, but he resisted temptation, though. He would certainly observe. Well, let's get to training, shall we? Kazuki asked, merrily. After all, we still have 10 days. 2 days later, Ichigo was entirely focused on the training he had been assigned. His fists were, yet again, clad in the crimson gauntlets, and he was stood 200 meters from a cliff face. Targets lined up a few meters from said wall. His challenge was to hit the targets, and nothing else. And he was failing spectacularly. He had never worked much on his aim. Especially not outside of a combat situation, where he would just rely on his well-honed, after such a long time of fighting opponents of a greater caliber than him, instincts. Now, when he was calm, and able to overthink what he was doing, he struggled to so much as get his shots on target, let alone have the perfect amount of reiatsu in the shot to stop from carrying on the small distance to the wall behind. Instead, the wall was scarred with cracks and craters, and, although several targets had been obliterated after Ichigo lost control of his infamous temper and sent more force at the dummies than he was supposed to, the points of significance in this particular task were largely untouched. Ichigo, Nejibana spoke up. Focus on the result, not the action. You know you can hit them. You've done more difficult things before by far. And if that does not work, think about why you are doing this. That is your reason to succeed, and that is why you need this control. Who knows who you will go up against in the Soul Society, if you fail to defeat them, what will happen to your friends? And Ichigo continued. Well, I believe congratulations are in order, Kurosaki. I was beginning to believe you would never succeed. Let us move on to the next challenge. It had taken Ichigo longer than they had to spare, but at least this would be a valuable skill for his invasion of the Seraiti. Now, let us see your abilities with your sealed Zanpukto, the shop owner said, jovially, before lunging forward with no further warning, his cane sword whipping through the air. Ichigo brought his longest katana, representing Ichigo, up to block the thinner, smaller blade with a frustrated snarl. He could really use a rest. Fireworks Festival, Fireworks Festival, Fireworks Festivaal. Isn't this exciting? We're finally here at the Fireworks Festival, Keigo exclaimed, as he danced around the crowd of Ichigo's family and friends. Wow, you're really enthusiastic, Mizuhiro commented. Who wouldn't be? We get to watch things explode. Hey, don't forget about me. Isshin Kurosaki interjected with a grin. I camped out over there all night to get the very best seats. He pointed at the pavement. A good spot. Sure, but Ichigo really doubted that it was worth camping out for. After all, the point of fireworks is that they are visible from a distance, right? And this display was built for people as enthusiastic as Keigo. Of course the explosions would be large enough to not require such close seating. All right, let's go. What about you lovely ladies? Isshin asked Orihime and Tatsuki, with a goofy grin that understandably made the two look a little unnerved. You wanna join us? We'll come along later. Tatsuki replied. Suit yourself. The eldest Kurosaki took off at a run, leaving the others, excluding the aforementioned girls, and his son, to take off in pursuit. Embarrassing, Ichigo commented, but I might as well follow them. He turned to face the black-haired girl. Sorry about that, Tatsuki. They're always like that. I know, Ichigo, I've met your father before, and I do go to school with Keigo. She replied, slightly amused at their antics and the lack of real reaction coming from Ichigo, who had built up an immunity to their idiocy over the years. Well, you don't have to come if you don't want to, you know. I'm sure you'd enjoy it more without their antics. No, we want to come, right Orihime? She spoke, waving off the suggestion. Yep, it sounds fun. The enthusiastic, though less so than the recently exited group, girl replied happily. We'll join you later, Ichigo. The lean girl smiled at her oldest friend, before he responded in kind. Okay, I'll see you later then. Congrats again on your tournament, Tatsuki. He grinned at the girl, before taking off at a jog after his family, leaving two girls, one obviously happy. To see that Ichigo was back out of his funk, and the other rapidly reddening at seeing her longtime crush with such a charming expression in his wake. While he did see them later on in the day, he left them to their own devices. They had seemed to be discussing something private, and he made an incorrect assumption, based on earlier misconceptions. Ichigo did, however, walk them home, with not so subtle praises coming from his father at being such a gentleman. "I raised you well, Ichigo," at which the not quite human just pretended he had never met the crazy man before in his life. They had been walking for only a few minutes before Ichigo noticed something strange. Inoue?" Ichigo asked, as he and Tatsuki noticed the very strange fact that Orihime was stood with her eyes closed and her head drooped back. "The hell? I think she's asleep," Tatsuki commented, as she heard the steady and heavy breathing of her friend. Right," Ichigo agreed, confusedly. "Does she sleep standing up often?" "Not that I'm aware of." Tatsuki shrugged. "But I can't say I'd be shocked to find out she did. It would just be another addition to the list of Orihime Inoue's quirks." "Well, should we wake her up?" "No, she must be exhausted to have fallen asleep like this." The second strongest girl in Japan commented. "I'm sure that between us we can comfortably support her. If we go to her house first, it shouldn't take more than 5 minutes or so." Are you forgetting your arm, Tatsuki? I don't think you're in the position to carry anyone." The raven-haired girl glared at the offending limb, annoyed with the disability. "Fine, then you can carry her. It should be easy enough for you, after all." And she was right. Ichigo's strength was obvious by now, the training of the last week only the icing on the cake in regards to the boy's lean muscles. Right, if you're sure." It was well known how Tatsuki tended to react to anyone who touched Orihime, one of the causes of Ichigo's confusion regarding the girls in front of him. The orange-haired male easily knocked Orihime's knees out from under her and lifted her smoothly into his arms, in the manner that one would carry a baby, or, as came to Tatsuki's mind, a bride. That was a thought that inexplicably aggravated the girl. The thought of Ichigo and bride in a sentence felt wrong, somehow. Moving on silently, so as to avoid waking the sleeping girl, Ichigo and Tatsuki quickly reached Orihime's apartment. Ichigo crept up the stairs to her door, following Tatsuki to the entrance, and addressed the still conscious girl. "You have a key, right?" he whispered to her. "Yes, it's just here." She fumbled with her key ring briefly before finding the correct key. She unlocked the door and walked in with the confidence that came with familiarity, immediately finding the light switch and flicking it on. Not surprising that she know her way round Inoue's place though, is it? Ichigo thought. "Just put her in here, Ichigo." Tatsuki pointed at one of the doors, evidently Orihime's room, and Ichigo quickly crossed inside, pointedly ignoring the fact that Inoue seemed to have snuggled into him a little. He moved into the room and gently laid the smaller figure onto the comfy-looking bed. He exited the room immediately, not wanting to risk the wrath of the still conscious girl, and found Tatsuki waiting back next to the light switch she had turned on when the trio had entered. He frowned a little as he saw her attempt to stifle a yawn, and asked the question he considered to be obvious. "Tatsuki, why don't you just stay here with Inoue?" The girl looked a little confused. "If it's about me telling anyone, you don't have to worry." "Because that would be inconsiderate. I've told my parents that I'd be home, and I don't want to impose on Orihime when my house isn't that far away to walk." She frowned, assuming he simply did not want to walk further out of his way. "But I don't mind if you'd rather head home. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself." "No, that's not it," Ichigo reassured his friend. "I just thought it was weird that you two weren't staying together." He shrugged as the two left Orihime's apartment. "I'd have thought you'd want to stay with each other since Inoue's going to see her family, I think. You know, get some last time in together before you have to spend some apart." "So," Tatsuki asked, "why would it matter that we're spending some time apart?" I was just under the impression that would cause the two of you duress." He half asked half said, not quite knowing how to phrase it. "'Cause you can normally, see each other every day." "Oh. 'Kay," Tatsuki responded, though she was very confused. It seemed like Ichigo was implying something, though she wasn't sure what. But that's not exactly something that would cause us duress, is it? I would have thought so, but I'm not exactly experienced in these matters. Ichigo said, feeling rather awkward with the conversation he was having. Not experienced? You have quite a few friends. More than me, at least. They hung out with a largely male group, after all. Maybe he didn't have more people that he considered friends, but Ichigo's odd charisma meant he had far more who considered him to be their friend than she. I mean, I really doubt you would be particularly upset if you couldn't see Keigo for a few weeks, would you? No, but that really isn't the same thing. Ichigo responded, with a shudder of revulsion at the thought. How do you figure that? Of course, me and Orihime are closer than you and Keigo, but there isn't that much difference. You two are still friends. Well, yeah, but I'm straight. Ichigo said, rather confused at the comparison. Not that there's anything wrong with being gay, of course. He added hastily. It just means that mine and any guy's friendship couldn't be comparable to your two's. What do you mean? What does that have to do with? Tatsuki's eyes widened as she trailed off. Wait, Ichigo, do you think I'm gay? She asked, shocked. Yes, Ichigo responded, confused once more. What? Why would you think that? Quote. Because you're dating Inoue. He, again, half-asked. What? No, I'm not. Really? Ichigo looked thoughtful for a second. That's all you have to say. She snapped at him. What else would I say? How about an apology? Okay, Tatsuki. He turned to face the girl. I sincerely apologize if I caused you any offense by implying that you are a lesbian. I didn't mean to, and that type of thing would never change my opinion of you, or Orihime. Ichigo said, with an entirely straight face. Is that good enough? She nodded absent-mindedly. Wait, is that what you meant by, you wouldn't tell anyone? That you thought we were sleeping together? Well, yes. He cringed at the slight look of horror on her face. I'm sorry, I just assumed that, since you spent so much time together. Both participants of the conversation were rapidly turning red at this point. But, like I said, I would never condemn the two of you for doing something like that, so please don't think I was judging you. I mean, it's not like, he cut himself off. I mean, I'm not one to know, you're both. I'm just going to stop talking. Tatsuki looked curiously, with a hint of amusement, up at Ichigo, despite her face still resembling his namesake. No, please finish your sentences. What aren't you? What are we? And what is it not like? The male's face was reddening even more as he mumbled something inaudible. Pardon, I was going to say that look, it's your house. Here we are. He gestured to the home of his oldest friend and picked up his pace. Come on, Ichigo, tell me what we are, she requested as she matched the newfound speed. However, the two quickly arrived at her doorway, and he said goodbye. I'll see you soon, Tatsuki. Hope you have a good holiday. He began moving away, before the girl's voice reached his ears again. Thanks for walking us home, Ichigo. And thanks for what I'm going to take as a compliment. Tatsuki assumed that he had been implying, from the half-sentences, she and Orihime were attractive, maybe that he could not blame them for giving into that temptation. It was my pleasure, goodnight Tatsuki. He called back, and yeah, they were compliments. The blue-eyed girl fell asleep with a smile on her face. A contrast to Ichigo's fate for the night. Yo, hat in, sandals. The orange-haired, living Shinigami called out as he entered the store, looking for the man that had sent him a message to be here. Well, now. Anyone home? Kurosaki-san. A voice spoke from behind him. Bah, what the hell? Kazuki was behind him. How'd you do that? A magician never reveals his secrets, young Ichigo. Remember that. He smirked at the obviously annoyed Soul Reaper. Now, come back out. I think that your friends will be arriving shortly. My friends? What do you mean? A talking cat? What the hell? A cat just spoke to me. His name is Yoruichi, and he's not an ordinary cat. Orihime, who the talking cat had gone to fetch, spoke up, cradling the shapeshifter in her arms as she spoke. It's understandable for him to have trouble with it. A talking cat is certainly strange. You commented. I'm still having trouble adjusting to it myself. Chad agreed, in a rumbling tone. Right. Urahara interrupted the conversation. Let's take this inside. There are things we can't discuss out here, in the open. He said, in his slightly childish tone. He received grunts of agreement from two of the males, while Orihime and Ichigo both lagged back a little. Increased further by the orange-haired male speaking up. Inoue, the busty girl turned a little towards Ichigo. Are you sure about this? It's going to be dangerous. He said, a concerned frown on his face. Don't worry Ichigo. Rukia is my friend too, I know what I'm getting into. I gave you my promise, and so I'm going with you. Orihime moved a little towards the shop entrance. And I gave my promise to Tatsuki that I'd come back to her. She darted into the shop. And the karate girl was surprised you thought she was a dyke. When Tits goes around saying stuff like that. Don't talk about them like that, Ichigo. Ichigo responded. But I agree with the general message, sans insults. That sounds weird for a friend to say. The boy followed after his friends, and quickly crossed the door's threshold. Woo! Orihime exclaimed as the group reached the bottom of the ladder, now in the large cavern underneath the candy store. It's so cool, so humongous, awesome. I guess, Ichigo commented, eyeing the busty girl worriedly at the look of awe she held. A look that increased as Tessai began thanking her profusely for the comment. Let's get down to business now, Kurosaki and Kurosaki's friends. Urahara exclaimed, jovially. Everyone look over here. The man was stood in front of a large stone square. This here's a Senkaimon, the entrance to the Soul Society. You need to listen closely as I tell you how to travel through. But first, the green-dressed man raised his cane, pointed at Ichigo, and whacked the human Shinigami with it, expelling the soul from his body. Oi, how about a little warning before you do that? Ichigo barked at Kazuki. Oh, wow, Orihime exclaimed, once again amazed. That was cool. So Ichigo, you're no longer inside this Ichigo anymore. I'm not a doll with interchangeable outfits, Orihime. Ichigo commented as she continually prodded at the still body. Alright, listen up. Unlike normal gates, this one has a spirit particle conversion machine. At the questioning looks, he elaborated. Ordinarily, only something in spirit form can travel through the tunnel, simply because the Soul Society is a spirit world. The conversion machine will turn you he pointed his stick at Chad, Orihime and Uryu. Into spirits as well. So you're saying that this gate will allow us to travel into the Soul Society without extracting our souls? Uryu clarified. Yes, and it will allow you to stay in your current forms. The group nodded. But, he spoke again, with a Cheshire cat grin. There's a catch. The window of time the gate can be kept open for you is only 4 minutes long. The man said, pausing twice for dramatic effect. The group gained worried expressions. But, is that enough time? Ichigo asked him. Ordinarily, no. The boy's sweat dropped. In fact, the whole scheme's a little shaky, but 4 minutes with the gate is all I can give you. After that, the gate will close and any who have not made it through will be trapped forever in Hidongai, the precipice world between the human world and the Soul Society. But, how will we make it? Orihime asked, fearfully. Go forward. You must have no doubt, no fear, do not think of those you are leaving behind. The masculine voice of Yoruichi spoke up. The will to go forward will be your guide. And don't look back, only those who can do these things can follow me through the gate and survive. When do we leave? Ichigo asked. I know this, and am not afraid. I'm pretty sure these guys know it too, or they wouldn't be here. Do you understand that, if you fail in this endeavor, you will never be able to return to this world? Then all I need to do is win. Ichigo said, calmly, and the cat responded with what seemed to be a smirk. Exactly. Are you all ready? Once it opens, you need to go immediately. Urahara was slightly more serious now, but Ichigo, for one, was not concentrating. One of the voices had spoken. Up before Kazuki began speaking. Nejibana's logic was almost annoying. It was difficult, to say the least, to ignore. And he wasn't sure he wanted to ignore it. Ichigo, I don't understand what you are doing, she told her wielder. What do you mean, Nejibana? She had brought this up suddenly, whatever it was she meant. Going into the Soul Society with your friends. I don't believe it will end well. Ichigo's brow sank into a frown. I won't leave Rukia to be executed for helping me, Nejibana. For saving my sisters. Whatever you say, you won't be able to convince me to leave her to that fate. I was not trying to, Ichigo. She said, with a sigh. I know that would be a pointless exercise. What I meant was that you may well be sacrificing one friend for another. Your friends are strong, but if they run into someone like the man that came to get Rukia, what do you think the outcome of that fight would be? I know you, Ichigo. If that happened, the storm would last for too long. You would never forgive yourself. Ichigo heard old man Zangetsu voice his agreement. You are strong, Ichigo. You will survive this with our help, but you would not survive the aftermath if you led those three to their deaths. The spirit confirmed. We have plenty. Long enough to reach the girl. If you trust in yourself, then your friend's presence would make virtually no difference in the battle ahead. He, along with the others, felt Ichigo. Prepare to interrupt. I know that they will be disgruntled by being left behind, Ichigo, but it is for the best. If you are so worried about their reaction, imagine the reaction of the rest of your friends and your sisters when they found out that you got them killed. It was a harsh thing to say, but Zangetsu knew that that one statement would secure Ichigo's agreement, and, therefore, his future happiness. It was their job to protect Ichigo from himself, too, after all. Okay, I'll go without them. This was going to be unpleasant when he returned. The three would not be happy. Do you think I should take the cat? He looked down at Yoruichi. Yes, it seems to know the Soul Society well. Having a guide will, no doubt, be beneficial. It would be a great hindrance to your cause if you could not find Rukia, would it not? Besides, I have a feeling that there is more to the cat than meets the eye. It may be useful to have with us in the Soul Society if it somehow is capable in the ways of fighting. Or, as is more likely, stealth. All right then, Ichigo said, blowing an audible breath out of his mouth in slight frustration at what he was to do next. As Kazuki Urahara finished his speech prior to sending those in front of him through the portal gate, his eyebrows raised as he felt the Reiatsu of Kurosaki raise minutely and focus on his legs. Why would he need Shunpo? In a muted flash, Ichigo vanished from the spot he had previously been occupying, and the bucket-hatted man's eyes subtly darted around, searching for the boy-turned-death god. Imagine his surprise when he found the boy. Ichigo held a sheath in one hand, and his wakizashi in the other, as he stood behind his companions. With two quiet thuds, the sheath and the hilt of the sword bonked into the back of Chad and Yuryu's head, sending the pair of males to the ground unconscious quickly, not even giving them time to know what had happened to render them unconscious. Next, and with more hesitation than he had given the other two, Ichigo moved to Orihime, and the sheath swung again, whacking Inoue on her head. Ichigo, presumably in an attempt to rectify the situation, caught her before she had even started to fall and lay her softly, and cautiously, on the ground, and then placed a hand against her head, a green glow coming from the palm and a mild healing Kido being cast on the very small lump that was beginning to form on the back of the orange-haired girl's head. Kurosaki-san, why did you do that? Urahara remained cheerful as he asked, though his left hand, which had previously been free for him to gesture extravagantly towards the gate, now joined his right on the cane sword as a precaution. My Zanpukto made a good point. It's stupid to bring them on this trip. There is a very real possibility that they would perish, and that's something that I want to avoid if at all possible. He frowned at the older man. Don't worry, them remaining in this world won't hinder the mission. Whatever stakes you hold in her rescue, 'cause I don't believe that you are doing all this for a simple gigai, you can rest assured that I'll still get Rukia back. Ichigo said, ignoring the insulted gasp that Urahara gave for his slight accusation. Hey. Whatever it is, I don't particularly care. You're helping me rescue my friend, and that's good enough for me. Well, I never, accusing me of deceit. I've been nothing but honest with him. Kazuki grumbled. Fine, I believe the gate is about to open. As he turned to look at the gate, the slight blue light that had been growing from it suddenly pulsed, and became a bright white light. And off you go. The shop owner's voice followed Ichigo as he scooped up, Yoruichi and ran into the gate. Good luck. Chapter 3. The Gatekeeper. Yoruichi. What the hell is that? Ichigo shouted at the cat sat on his shoulder, as he sprinted down the dark corridor of the Dongai. He could feel something behind him, approaching fast. And dear God was it unsettling. It's the cleaner and it does what it says on the tin. Once a week it comes through the precipice world to clear out anything that happens to be here. The cat had an annoying habit of remaining too calm, like the blasted shopkeeper, though thankfully to a more tolerable extent. As was shown by her next statement. If it touches us, we will be lost forever, why does it have to be today? Yoruichi hissed in frustration, claws digging into Ichigo's shoulder slightly. Faster, Ichigo. Not even bothering to snap back at the feline for ordering him about, Ichigo did what he was told, the world turning to a blur as the orange-haired teen, with the black cat perched on his upper back, raced along. That's good, Ichigo. Keep it up, the cat encouraged. I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. The pair approached the entrance to the Soul Society as the train-like cleaner lagged behind. Well done, Ichigo. The last word was dragged out as the sprinting boy crossed the threshold into the spirit world. Apparently Urahara had managed to situate the exit to the tunnel several hundred feet up. Ichigo grunted as he stood back up, having landed awkwardly. Bastard hat and sandals. What a dick. Could have at least spent a couple of extra minutes to give us a decent exit. I bet he just got distracted by a shiny object they thought was a coin like the stingy bastard he is. Oi, Yoruichi. He turned, looking for the cat, and found it gingerly sitting, licking at one of its front paws. You all right? It ignored him, barely sparing the Shinigami-garbed boy a glance before going back to the job at hand. Okay, then, remind me to kick his ass when we get back, will ya? My sentiments exactly, Ichigo. I will make sure to assist you, in fact, once we return, but let us get going before our entrance attracts attention from the wrong sorts. You mean Shinigami, I'm guessing. What else would give them trouble? But he felt the need to check that was the case, nonetheless. Hi, come, let's get going. Yoruichi hopped onto the awaiting shoulder of her taxi. This way. The feline pointed its tail off into the distance, towards a clump of trees, located behind a Rukongai village. Right, you on safely? Yes, let's get going. Ichigo, the longer we're here, the greater the risk becomes. The orange-haired boy nodded, and vanished from sight in a slight flash of light. Hey, Yoruichi, Ichigo asked, as they wandered even deeper into the trees. Where are we going, exactly? The cat replied, having been sleeping, taking the nap of its kind. Oh, we're heading to a small town. It's not too far, but it's ideal for what we want to do next. What we want to do? Ichigo replied with a slight frown of confusion. Get into the Sarate, of course. Yoruichi answered with a tone that suggested it really should be obvious to him. Sarate. Again, Ichigo asked. What the hell is the Sarate? You mean you don't know? Why would I ask if I knew? Ichigo snapped. 10 days and Kazuki did not see fit to take a few minutes to explain the structure of the place you would be invading. The cat exclaimed, irritated. Fine then, her tail pointed off to the side. I will tell you the information you need over in that clearing. What clearing? Ichigo had turned to walk over to the aforementioned area, but could not see even a gap in the trees. Just trust me, I know these woods well. It's one of the many places I used to train. Thank you for telling me this, Yoruichi. Ichigo said, only a slight waver in his tone from the shock of his recent lecture. So the summary is that we are going to one of those gates. Right. Yes, that is right. And the White Road Gate. You sounded like you were more willing to face off against Jidanbo than the others. Yoruichi looked surprised. I did not expect you to pick up on that, Ichigo. The cat commented. You were more perceptive than I thought. Yes, I would rather fight Jidanbo than any of the others. I believe that he will be more willing to let us in without the necessity of killing him. The others, I firmly believe, would not accept defeat as a reason to let us pass, but Jidanbo thinks that is required for his honor as a gatekeeper. Killing one of their most prolific soldiers would draw undue attention onto us, and we do not need it so soon, even if it is just about inevitable for you to be found out and pursued eventually. So how long will it take for us to reach the west gate, then? If we leave now, we ought to reach the gate before nightfall. Assuming we adopt a brisk pace, that is. Does that mean you will be walking this time? Ichigo replied, with a raised eyebrow. Of course not. Yoruichi snorted. I am injured from Urahara's idiocy. It would be a social faux pas, at best, for you to let me walk myself. Now, up you get, Ichigo. We have a lot of ground to cover today. The cat whacked him with its tail. But Ichigo noticed its look. He didn't understand it, of course, but he certainly noticed it. Fine. He pushed himself to his feet, before leaning his shoulder down slightly to give Yoruichi better access. Get on then. With pleasure. The cat winked at him. Weird. I wonder what that was about. Ah, we're nearing the gate, Ichigo. Yoruichi said, from its position curled around Ichigo's neck. You should slow down. The boy stopped flash stepping along the path and slowed to a brisk jog. Okay, and where will the gate come down? Ichigo wondered aloud to the cat. Just past this town. This is District 1, so there should be no trouble as we pass through. All right, are you going to get down, or are cat scarves the trend for soul reapers? They aren't usually, no. But Jidanbo will know you have no authorization to pass through. If you don't fight and defeat him, he will contact a high-ranking officer to investigate. That will lead to exposure. Basically, it means that we're better off fighting the giant. Right. Ichigo's attention was wrenched away from their conversation as he spotted a sight to behold in the distance. Hey, Yoruichi, he pointed to the much more classy area of the Soul Society. Is that the Sarate? Hi, that's the place. Ichigo could hear a smirk in his companion's tone. And you best get ready for a fight. Right about now. The two were approaching the cleaner, more polished stone, when the cat said this. Giving Ichigo just enough time to leap back before a massive chunk of blue-silver stone, forming what appeared to be a wall, slammed down no more than a foot in front of his previous position. It sent a billowing cloud of dust into the air in front of Ichigo and Yoruichi, who decided this was the perfect time to vacate her position on Ichigo's neck. Coughing slightly, from the dry, irritating dust, Ichigo quietened as he heard a booming voice proclaim. Well, it has been a long time since someone tried to breach the Sarite gate without a travel permit. You're a rare guest. Welcome, kid, he smirked condescendingly at the boy in front of him. Or do you prefer Dandelion Head? Had Yoruichi have been noticed by the man, he may have observed a hint of amusement in the feline's expression. While the human world resident was aware that Jidanbo was a strong opponent, potentially giving a couple of lieutenants a run for their money, she had seen Ichigo fighting Kazuki when he was training. And had noticed something about him, and the way he had been acting, that told Yoruichi this Ichigo was not the same as the one she had seen several times in the years prior, when Urahara sent her to check on Isshin and his kids. Him and his Zanpukto, they had a very strange closeness. Yoruichi knew, like just about every other soul reaper, that those who wanted to master the arts of their blades had to utilize the greatest teacher available, the Zanpukto spirits themselves. And those taught by such amazing mentors were never slouches in any of their abilities. The feline could count on its paws the number of people rumored to have trained in their inner world. And that number included some seriously strong people. And yet, none were as unique as the boy. No, that wasn't right. At this point, the carrot-top teen in front of her no longer even looked the way he had when they set out, a phenomenon she guessed to be the work of all that time in his inner world, where time moves far more slowly. That, and the look on his face, the look of a warrior, told her that term did not fit Ichigo Kurosaki. None were as unique as the man in front of her. To paraphrase her old friend, Ichigo was one scary bastard. And Jidanbo just called him a dandelion. Meanwhile, the man in question was having an internal debate. If you ain't gonna kill, I am, at least hit, I am with a Sero. Where's your sense of fun? His inner hollow whined. Look, I'm sure I'll be using your blade soon enough. There are some tough opponents in there, and you'll be very effective in the fights that need me to do some real damage to them. But this guy, you expect me to go all out on him? Why? Because, oh, fine, it's, 'cause I'm bored. B-O-R-D bored. That isn't how you spell bored. Oh, shut up Nejibana. Come on Keying, let me kill something. I don't give a shit if he's worthy of your blade, as the grumpy bastard is so fond of telling you. I just want some blood. Ichigo, old man Zangetsu spoke up. To be clear, I only believe that that is the case for our releases. As much as I like to see Ichigo disappointed, none of us want you to risk your safety for the sake of preserving our honor. Especially not through an unwillingness to use your sword. I do not believe that it is right for you to use your Shikai, or Bankai once you achieve it, against weaklings simply because that is a hindrance to you. Not only does it take energy, it will make it far more well known what those trump cards. Someone finds a weakness, you could get hurt. It is our duty to do everything we can to ensure your safety, whether or not Ichigo shows it. Right, so, is it agreed that won't use any of your releases against someone like this? An affirmative sound. Of course, Ichigo-sama. I agree, Ichigo. Single quote. Oh, fine, but at least get in some fights with these higher caliber opponents soon. I'm sure we will, Ichigo. Ichigo reassured the sadistic spirit. Just think of it, hundreds of soul reapers waiting on the other side of that gate, just waiting for us to fight them. He appeased the hollow. Single quote. Well then, what are we waiting for? Let's get through this guy and move on to those fuckwads. There now. That's the spirit. Ichigo turned his attention back to the giant ahead of him. He was still rambling, but at least now he had shown an interest in actually fighting and not just giving the indifferent figure of Ichigo a lecture. He now had an axe resting in his hand, and was looking down on Ichigo. Both literally and metaphorically. Quote. As you are a lowly country bumpkin, I will do you a favor, and give you a free lesson on manners in these parts. I wouldn't want you dishonoring my town through your pathetic manners, after all. First, when you return from outside, wash your hands. Jidanbo said, stern expression and all. Second, don't eat food that's fallen on the floor. Well, it's settled, then, he's a dumbass. Why would we need to be told that? And third, when you are in a fight, it is one-on-one. I wonder if he's just used to multiple people trying to get through the gate and felt the need to say it out habit. Why else would he tell me THS shit? Ichigo commented silently. Luckily, since you are the only one here, kid, we don't have to worry about that last rule. Jidanbo continued, only to notice his opponent, apparent lack of interest. Oi, when someone's talking to you, the large man raised his one-handed axe. You listen. H brought the massive axe down in a hammer blow, right on top of the spot Ichigo was occupying, or had been, as T turned out. Oi, watch what you're doing, big man. That coulda killed me. Ichigo was stood a foot to the side, scowling at the axe, now embedded in the stone floor. What the? Jidanbo frowned, confused, at his axe. He obviously didn't understand how he had missed. Oh, I get it. It must have been one of those, gusts of wind. Yep, a gust of wind must have blown my axe, of course. You're a lucky kid. You have time to give a quick prayer to Kami. A giant smirk appeared on the to-scale face. Isn't it bad manners to attack before your opponent is ready, gatekeeper? Or are you a country bumpkin too? Well, you are a lucky one, kid. It's been decades since someone survived my first strike. Even if this was only due to your good luck. But, be warned, nobody has ever survived my second. The giant man lifted his axe again. Jippen Jidanda Matsuri. The axe swung again. 1. And again. 2. Dust billowed to even Jidanbo's chest level. 3. 4. 5. The vertical chops gave loud bangs and crunches as tea smashed into the floor over and over again. 6. 8. 7. 6. 4. 9. 7. 8. Should I let him know he's past 10 already? Ichigo wondered, before dismissing it with a thought of, I'm sure he'll figure it out eventually. Ha, as I said, Jidanbo began as the dust settled, after he had stopped swinging the axe wildly. There isn't even any remains of the kid left. The giant smirked at the empty ground, not noting the fact that there was no gore to go along with Ichigo supposedly being obliterated. Ahem. A voice from behind Jidanbo coughed. The gatekeeper turned to find the source of that mysterious noise. What the? How'd you survive, Candy Head? Survive? I survived by not being hit by an attack that would be too weak to hurt me anyway. If that was your best, you ought to give up now. My best, Jidanbo snorted. You haven't seen anything yet. The man reached into his kimono and drew a second axe, identical to the first. Prepare yourself for Banzai Jidando Matsuri. He raised his blades. Raw. He brought the two gargantuan axes down in a blur, and Ichigo yawned pointedly. Sorry, bud, but I don't have the time, and definitely not the patience, to let you keep trying to hit me. I'll make sure to leave one of your weapons intact though, so don't worry. The orange-haired non-Shinigami darted forward, briefly vanishing from his gigantic opponent's view. When he reappeared, two of his blades, the longest katana and the wakizashi, were drawn, and he himself was in midair. The swords, both over Aikio's head, descended with startling speed, and Ichigo smirked. The giant barely even saw it coming, before the axe shattered into 1,000 shards as it gave way under a pair of Zanpukto. Once again, Ichigo vanished from sight in a flash of light. Eep! He felt the cold touch of steel, suddenly, against his throat. You done? The cold face of Ichigo Kurosaki, stood in midair, asked his so-called opponent. The massive head nodded. Good. Drop your other axe. The behemoth of a weapon dropped to the ground with an echoing thud, and the orange-haired man descended to the floor below. Okay. Now will you please open the gate? Why, you're not going to kill me? Really? Of course not. Why would take your life? You're just doing your job. And as a gatekeeper, I'm sure you'll let me in now. Why, yes. Yes, that is what is required for me. By my honor as a gatekeeper, I will open the gate for you. The big man teared up, but turned away in time to compose himself. Stand back, my friend. He squatted down next to the metal-lined segment of the wall, signaling that that was the entrance. While he was straining, huffing and puffing, Ichigo quickly stepped over to the observing feline. Well done, Kurosaki-san. Yoruichi's masculine voice commented, but do not grow complacent. Jidanbo was just the first of many opponents you will be required to face before this journey is done. Of course, Yoruichi. Thankfully, however, I won't need them conscious at the end of our fight to open a big-ass gate, will I? I suppose not. The cat smirked at Ichigo. It was good for him to take that approach if he wanted to win this. That was fortunate for us, Ichigo. Had it been earlier in the day, we may well have run into a few patrols or, God forbid, a captain of the court guard squads. The two were now in a SDE alley off from the main road. Now, Ichigo, sit down. We both need to get some sleep to be prepared for the morning and any combat it may bring. Right, I could use some sleep, Ichigo admitted, just as another yawn threatened to expel from him. And for that reason, Ichigo slumped against the wall and dropped to the ground. So, what are we going to do, Tomer-oomph? The black cat hopped onto his lap, surprising Ichigo briefly before he shrugged. That behavior was commonplace for cats, after all. What are we going to do tomorrow? Ichigo continued. We'll be making our way, indirectly, east. That is probably where Rukia is being kept. However, we'll have to find someone to confirm that for us, lest we waste too much time on the trip. AMD lose the opportunity to do what we need to. The cat, having been facing the opposite wall, turned to face Ichigo. Tell me, how far are you from Bankai? The cat would have raised an eyebrow, if cats had eyebrows to raise, that is. On which blade? Ichigo replied. They have different criteria, after all. Let's say Zangetsu. Yoruichi shrugged. They're the furthest. I have to fight them both to a standstill out in the real world, so that they can test my true strength against theirs. Something about the fact that we fight differently in my inner world. Is that so? The cat frowned. Not surprising. The Getsus are comp type. They would want you to prove yourself properly in combat. Ichigo nodded in response. Well, what about your others? Nejibana. She had heard from Urahara some theories about how Ichigo possessed the Zanpukto of a long-since deceased Shinigami. The most promising was that of him being a reincarnated form of Kaion Shiba, and the previously though impossibly short time between Kaion's death and Ichigo's birth. Nejibana had simply stayed attached to the soul, and so was still a part of Ichigo. Hang on, I'll need to ask Nejibana herself, she's never been all too clear about that. Nejibana. Hi, Ichigo-sama. Firstly, please stop calling me that. He had asked countless times, but he was uncomfortable with the honorific. And may I ask how I am to achieve your Bankai? An odd sensation came over Ichigo. It was coming from the female spirit, but wasn't one of the ones that he had felt from her, or any of the others, before. If you come in here, and visit, I guess I can tell you. She sounded shy. Okay, thank you, I'll visit tonight. Does it have to be Jinzen, or can I just visit in my sleep? Sleep is fine, Ichigo. See you soon then, Nejibana. He said to the Zanpukto, kindly, before speaking out loud once more. Nejibana says I need to visit, then she will tell me how to get her Bankai. Then you will do that when we are done here, Yoruichi stated, leaving no room to argue. Tell me, what about your last Zanpukto? What was its name again? An annoyed growl resounded inside Ichigo's head. Why did she remember the other two? Stupid she-cat. His name is Tabagarasu, Yoruichi. Okay, and what about my other question? The orange-haired human turned Shinigami gulped nervously. Ichigo, how are you in progressing to your Bankai with him? I've already got his Bankai, Yoruichi. What? Ichigo, you are aware that the cat will not stop asking what your final release is with Tabagarasu until you tell her, or show her that of another, don't you? Yeah, I know that, old man. But you know why I can't tell her that. I'll just have to put up with it, won't I? Yes, I suppose you will. What I was trying to say, however, that you should work towards achieving R and Nejibana's Bankai. The cloak-wearing man turned his head to face something Ichigo could not identify. On that note, I do believe that Nejibana is heading this way. Goodbye, for now, Ichigo. Flashback. Years ago. Kyan, can you hear me? The panicked, no longer melodious, tone of Nejibana screeched. Kyan, please resist, please. Kyan's sight was black. That thing had gotten him. He couldn't die. He couldn't. Worse was to come. He was changing. Becoming one of them. She would be forced to endure it alongside him. Nejibana would deteriorate right alongside her wielder. It would have been better for them to die. Kyan, as a Shinigami, he would be reborn. As a hollow, he might be truly destroyed. Tears began to flow. Please, don't turn Kyan. Please, just survive. Then came Rukia Kuchiki. Nejibana would never forget that girl, and what she did for her wielder. Not that I'll be able to see forever. The spirit thought, with a small, depressed smile. The sword pierced them, and Nejibana fell into the darkness. Flashback end. Then, though, when all hope had faded, along came her Ichigo. The water Zanpukto, along with Tabagarasu, was called to the despairing soul of an 8-year-old human boy. She would always be thankful for that. For being born, again, into such an honorable mind. Turning from a sweet child, who hid his pain behind the mask of a scowl, into an amazing young man. And she liked to think that she had helped a lot in that regard. Who knows how Ichigo would have turned out otherwise? Waking up under his mother's copse. The person he cared for far and away more than any other, at least at that point. His determination to protect after that, it really helped her, too. She swore to help him, became the only person he ever seemed to be honest with. Who he showed anything except anger to. And in return, she. Nejibana, Ichigo called, waving his hand in front of the female spirit's face to get her attention. You all right? You zoned out for a while there. The water Zanpukto reddened noticeably, even to Ichigo. Hi, I'm fine, Ichigo-sama. The beautiful, kimono-wearing Zanpukto said, as she blushed to the roots of her dark blue, wavy hair. Why are you here? She stammered. The orange-haired man frowned in confusion. Had she forgotten? Because you told me to come here tonight, remember? Ichigo asked. Are you sure you're okay, Nejibana? You normally have a really good memory. Ah, of course. Yes, I'm fine, Ichigo. I just spaced out a little, please accept my apologies. Did you say that you wanted to discuss your Bankai? Her breath came in quick, quiet gasps at this point. Yes, that's right. Ichigo grinned at the occupant of his soul, only to sink back into the frown as she began to look even more feverish. If something is the matter, please tell me, Nejiba MPFF. Holy. The Zanpakuto's lips crashed against his in a hasty, and slightly rough, kiss. Wow, she never did this when I was Kyan. His memories from his previous life were few and far between, but that was because he remembered shocking, or significant, events. His soul slayer kissing him, that would have been one of them. The elegant woman moaned, as Ichigo responded in a positive manner, and she sank into the feeling of bliss that brought her. She ran her tongue over his lips, begging for entrance, and "Whoa, you go king," and Ichigo pulled away, turning to face the, now guffawing and hooting, Hollow. Nejibana's gaze locked onto the grinning man, too, and her expression twisted into one of anger. Bastard! A trident soared towards Ichigo, passing through the space that, had he not ducked, would have contained his head. Uh-oh, he took off running, not even making a quip in the face of the female spirit's anger. Nejibana ran off in pursuit, and Ichigo was left, standing on his own, in a daze in their wake. What the hell just happened? Chapter 4. The Moon in the Daytime. Well, look what we have here, Yumashika, was the first thing Ichigo Kurosaki heard the next morning. A greenhorn Shinigami fallen asleep this close to our Patal grounds. I reckon we ought to teach him why he should avoid the 11th Division's barracks. And by we, I mean me. Ichigo. World came into focus as a male's shadow blocked out the sun. What the hell? I could have sworn it was daytime. Why's the moon still out? He heard someone let out an effeminate chuckle that could, very easily, be mistaken for a giggle. That's my head, you bastard. Now extremely annoyed, Shinigami known as Akaku Madarame yelled at the groggy, orange-haired stranger in front of him. Now, get up and fight me. It's bad enough that my fellow 11th Divisioners take the piss out of me bout my shaved head. Cough bald cough, shut up Yumashika. But I won't let some pathetic, newbie weakling get away with it. Fine, if you ain't gonna shut up until we fight. Let's get on with it. Ichigo stood, dusting off his robes, and stretched, popping the muscles in his back a little as he did so. The habit of very much enjoying sleep came with his memories from being Kyan, too. He'd always tried to find time, in the afternoon especially, for a good nap back when he was in 13th Division. I assume it'll be one-on-one, right? The growling bald man nodded, and then something occurred to Ichigo. Hey, have either of you seen a cat round here? Seems to have vanished. He pointedly looked around for Yoruichi, but found no trace of the feline. Well, I'm sure Yoruichi can manage while I deal with these clowns. So, what are the rules in this bout? Rules? Akaku scoffed. No rules. Just that here's no running. The bald man grinned. Only cowards run, right? Hey, what is your name? I'm Akaku Madarame, 3rd seat of 11th Division, and I reckon it's only polite to give your name to someone you're gonna try and kill. Ichigo Kurosaki. Nice to meet you, but I'll be hesitant to fight you with the peacock guy stood over there. Who knows what he'll do if I'm beating you? Oh, Yumashika won't do anything. But I see your point. Oi, Yumashika, go let the captain know why I'm gonna be late for my station. Very well, Akaku, have fun. The man half ran half skipped off towards the main road. Now, I just need a moment, Kurosaki. The 3rd seat backed off, and stood in the center of the small street. You are about to witness my lucky dance. What a freak, Ichigo thought, as the bald man finished his dance thing. We gonna start, then, Akaku. Or do you have a poem you want to recite, too? Fuck off, I have to do my lucky dance, not to do so would be unlucky. Really, I never would have guessed that the lucky dance was supposed to give you luck. Fuck you, Kurosaki, prepare yourself, cuss now you've made me mad. The 11th Division member roared as he lunged at his opponent, unsheathing Hozukimaru mid-leap. He swung viciously at his opponent's neck, and let out another growl. This wouldn't be a satisfying fight. The greenhorn in front of him hadn't even drawn his Zanpukto. He'd die from a single what the? Where'd he go? Ichigo had vanished from Akaku's line of sight, and the fight-loving Shinigami's path was now empty of the obstacle he had been expecting to encounter, something that very much threw him off balance. I think you missed, the orange-haired fighter commented as his opponent recovered from his stumble. Akaku spun on his heel, and faced the stranger. Who the fuck are you? He demanded of Ichigo. No way was this guy unranked, an unranked member wouldn't be able to avoid his strike. None of them had good enough reflexes for that. And if he had been ranked, Akaku's lieutenant would have insisted that he move to her division, because his hair was the color of candy. Yakiru would not miss out on having such a member in her division. And Kenpachi wouldn't much care either way, so long as Ichigo amused Yakiru and was willing to fight. I told you, Ichigo Kurosaki. Ichigo replied, honestly, as he drew Ichigo Zanjetsu, the abnormally long katana's steel blade glinting in the morning light. Then what are you? You ain't a soul reaper, that's for damn sure. Akaku exclaimed, with a grin. He had a feeling that this'd be a better fight than he'd expected. Sorry, I've been told not to say too much, or it could backfire. Ichigo shrugged. Shall we get back to the fight? Yes, let's. He lunged again, swinging the empty sheath at Ichigo's skull and his katana at the longer blade. No way this Kurosaki guy could block both. He would block the blade, and then be knocked groggy as Hozukimaru's sheath whacked him over the head. Well, that's what the bald-headed third seat believed and expected. But that was based on one incorrect assumption. That Ichigo intended to block. Sorry about this. If I don't give him some blood soon, Zanjetsu'll be even more irritating than normal. The orange-haired hybrid announced, as Akaku neared. He raised his blade, pointed at Akaku and parallel to the ground, and stepped forward. And, who knows, maybe this'll teach you not to mindlessly jump at your opponent, when you know nothing about him. Ichigo commented, before disappearing in a blur of flash step. The bloodthirsty chrome dome, as Yakiru would call him, grunted as Zanjetsu's tip pierced his right shoulder, stabbing through to the hilt, and his weapon's sheath fell to the floor with a clatter as his hand spasmed. Shit. Fuck. You're fast, Kurosaki. A bloodthirsty grin spread over the third seat's face. But you chose the wrong arm. Hozukimaru flashed, hacking shortly at his opponent's right arm, the one holding his, now blood-drenched, Zanpukto. Gah! The longer sword was yanked harshly out of his shoulder, far faster than the stabbed man had expected. His own katana bounced off the sword, as the pain shifted Akaku's focus, and Madarame stumbled backwards. The bald man growled as he noticed, to add insult to injury, that his opponent had relaxed his stance. Raising the hilt to his mouth, the 11th squad member gripped it in his teeth, his vision beginning to dim from the gushing wound on his shoulder, and fumbled with the hilt's pommel until he plucked it off and gained access to his blood-clotting ointment. It wouldn't be enough for long-term healing, but hopefully the paste would stop the bleeding for the rest of this fight, at least. Well, that's just cheating. Shut up. It's not cheating. It's called being well prepared. You're supposed to marvel at my brilliance. He screamed at the other man, frustrated with the accusation. If you say so, Ichigo replied, indifferently. You done? Or are we going to continue? Done. Done. I won't be done, till I'm dead. He charged forwards yet again, wobbling a little as he rushed blindly at his, so far, superior opponent. Ichigo began, before disappearing in a blur of speed. Bugh! Akaku made a strange sound, as a fist crashed into the back of his head, and fell, face first, to the ground, a lump rapidly forming on the point of impact. Until you're unconscious. He nudged the out-of-it man with his foot and received a groan in response. Not knocked out, huh? I guess a third seat is more resilient than I expected. He shrugged. That's probably a good thing. The orange-haired man grabbed his opponent by the back of his kimono, and moved him away from Hozukimaru. Oi, wake up! Ichigo barked at Akaku. Nothing. Dumbass, get up, nada. Oh, that'll work. Ichigo smirked to himself, and drew in a breath. Baldy. Fuck you. Akaku sat up with that exclamation, a look of rage on his face. Who do you think you are? Crap. Seeming to remember where he was. The third seat leapt to his feet, only to stagger and fall back down. What the? Why am I dizzy? 'Cause I punched you in the back of your head, I'd guess. Ichigo told him. Now, I've got some questions I need to ask you. Why would I answer them? The bald man hissed. And why didn't you finish me off? I had no reason to. Third seat Madarame. You were fighting me for the sake of fighting. That's something I don't mind, even though wanting it to be to the death is annoying. Your reason is one I can understand, and so I can accept it. So long as you don't select one of those I care for to sat your bloodlust. Ichigo stated, leaning against a wall as Akaku rose, unsteadily, to his feet. What do you want to know, then? Akaku sneered. My birthday. Ichigo ignored his tone. I want to know where Rukia Kuchiki is being kept. The Ryoka, though he did not know that title yet, answered simply. Kuchiki. You mean the death row inmate. His sneer fell away, replaced with a look of confusion. What do you want with someone like that? To save her. Save her. How many of you are there? Myself. And a cat. You. And a cat. Ha. Bahaha. You're kidding. What is this, a suicide mission? Exclamation mark quote. He used the fact that Ichigo turned from him, to avoid looking at, and so getting angered by, the ridiculing expression to make a run for his weapons, scooping the sheath and sword duo off the ground and spinning, intending to block an incoming strike. Only to find none incoming. His confusion quickly gave way to a grin, however, as Akaku slammed the pommel of his sword against the butt of his sheath. His enemy would not be expecting this. Grow, Hozukimaru. The blade and sheath combined, extending into a long spar with a red tassel on the blunt end. Now, Ichigo, don't misjudge. The Yari snapped, and Ichigo appeared, in front of the shocked Akaku, with Zanjetsu still extended, tip dripping blood from the vertical slash running down the third seat of Zaraki Division's chest. When Akaku woke, he found his Zanpukto, complete with sheath, resting next to him, the only change being the now mostly empty pommel. Bastard. Damn, I've got to stop doing that. Ichigo commented to himself, with a scowl. He had attempted to do a long-distance shunpo, and ended up, somewhere he hadn't intended to be. Still in the Sarate, of course, but he had no idea where in the large compound. Practice makes perfect, right King? Eventually we'll get it down. If not, you could always use Sonido. The Hollow suggested, in his version of subtlety, which was, basically, not yelling. There is no need to worry about this, Ichigo. The calmer Zanjetsu added, I am given to understand that this is a hard skill to learn, and you have never had anything like formal training on it. Perhaps you will be able to find someone once this is done. Plus, I bet it makes ya harder to follow, Kingy. After all, if you don't know where you're going, how could your enemies? The Hollow added, finding a possible silver lining. Ichigo was now stood on a building. So that was a start. Great job, King. You've narrowed it down to one of the gazillion buildings in this place. Really, I applaud your brilliance. Ichigo's eyes narrowed. Hey, old man. Yes, Ichigo. Did Nejibana ever get a hold of Ichigo? No. Ichigo got the distinct impression that Zanjetsu was smirking. Evidently he knew what was to happen next. Why you wouldn't? Hey, Flower. Ichigo called into his own mind. He's over here. After which silence, other than a few yelps and squeaks of pain, was all that Ichigo heard from his mindscape. The orange-haired Shinigami chuckled, before his head snapped around. He could have sworn he'd heard a booming voice announce something from a half-mile, or so, to his left. What was a Ryoka? Ichigo couldn't help but wonder, since the word inspired such an uneasy feeling in him. Ichigo was willing to admit that he was lost. Not out loud, granted, but in the confines of his own head he was comfortable admitting his current predicament. Hell, he may even accept that the responsibility for the situation rested on his shoulders. But that did not change the fact that he was getting very annoyed right now. With each building, the hybrid's frustration grew. It was dumb. To expect to just run into another ranked Soul Reaper to question, since he did not get the information he needed from Akaku, but, even so, Ichigo kept at it. He figured that, eventually, he would find somebody that knew where in this thrice-damned place they were holding Rukia, they would tell him where, and he would finally know where he was meant to be heading. If only the blasted cat had told him that, or anything, before scampering off to do God knows what. Suddenly, his sharp ears, even when he was doing his best to suppress his Reiatsu in an ineffective way that cut off the majority of his abilities, caught a boom in the distance, somewhere to the east, or at least he believed that direction to be east, anyway, of Ichigo's position. Just stopping himself from trying to shunpo over, that was the cause of his being lost. After all, Ichigo took off at a bounding run, leaping from building to building as he neared the source of that noise. As he reached the nearest building and peered over the edge, he saw a hole in a wall. That was it. Oh, come on, the sleeveless Shihakusha wearing human exclaimed. How had he missed whoever caused that damage? He had been quick, for Kami's sake. Suddenly, Ichigo darted to the side, moving in a blur of speed that, as he became visible again, showed him holding his wakizashi, old man Zanjetsu's blade form. Where he had previously been stood, an odd sight was now visible. From a cloud of dust, an big, ugly head, surrounded by large red beads, protruded. Huh, where'd he go? The oversized Soul Reaper, now free from the dust, wondered aloud, before turning to look for the orange-haired Ryoka. Now, Ichigo could see the behemoth in greater detail. He bore a certain resemblance to Jidanbo, the guardian of the West Gate, and wore a large, beaded necklace with a red tuft hanging from the lowest and largest of them. Likewise, he had a bracelet consisting of red beads on his left wrist, drawing Ichigo's attention to the fact that he held a Zanpukto in a ready, but slightly sloppy, grip. So you were fast enough to dodge my strike from such a close range. Impressive. I dare say that if we had not met here, you may have gone on to do great things. Unfortunately for you, however, your journey ends here. The ugly man stated, confidently. It is almost sad, and, so, I will give you some time to make peace with yourself, before I kill you. You have 10 seconds. 1. Is this guy serious? The hollow deadpanned. 2. Single quote ... single quote. 3. It looks like it, yeah. 4. Well, even I agree he doesn't deserve one of your releases. 5. I don't even want to dirty a Zanpukto by using it against him. 6. I would quite like to see you punch him in the face, King. 7. And I would quite like to punch him in the face. 8, 9, 10. He drew his sword back, and crouched slightly. Now that you are prepared, I will show you the way in which you will die. He leapt forwards with a yell that sounded like, "Ew," and, surprisingly, considering his bulk, sailed through the air towards Ichigo. This, however, did not mean he did it quickly. Ichigo stepped to the side, as Jirobo landed, and sheathed Zanjetsu. Again, your speed impresses me, but no matter. The man jumped back again, and landed 25 feet from his opponent. Now, I will end your regrettable misfortune. It will be a merciful death, do not worry. He placed his hand against the tip of his Zanpukto. Flap away, Sunzukigarasu. The blade gave way under his palm, and dozens of curved, spinning blades appeared around him, floating in midair. You see, Ryoka, I am the master of flying weapons. You have no hope to live past that which is too fast for your eyes to see. The large man flung his hand forwards, fingers splayed. PFF'd. You think that's fast, fatso. My pet snail moves faster than that. The hollow was genuinely upset at the implication of such a pathetic man calling himself fast. If you wanna see fast, you should see my Bankai. From the brief demonstrations Ichigo had seen, comparing this to Zanjetsu's Bankai form would be like comparing a space hopper to a Formula 1 car. Though projectiles were likely quite useful even at this speed. Ichigo vanished from his opponent's line of sight, and the man let out a confused grunt. None of his blades had any blood on them. Did the orange-haired man not bleed? Strange. Jirobo, then, felt something tap his shoulder, and spun around, only to be met with Ichigo Kurisaki's knuckles as his fist slammed into the large man's face. Stupidly, Jidanbo let go of his Zanpukto to try to break his fall with his hands, as he went flying, and briefly caught sight of it being kicked off the side of the building by the Ryoka. Who are you? The fourth seat whimpered. Ichigo Kurosaki. I'd ask in return, but I don't care. Ichigo's irritation was showing. Now, you are going to tell me where Rukia Kuchiki is, aren't you? Why yes sir. Good. Very good. So, I'm looking for a white tower called the Senzaikyu. Ichigo clarified to himself. Near the center of the Siraiti. He looked around for something. But, I still don't know which way that is. Damn it. Ichigo cursed. He really should have checked that with the Jidanbo guy about that, before he knocked him unconscious. But the orange-haired Shinigami had left the annoyance behind by now. Far behind. Now, Ichigo was bounding from building to building, heading in what he believed to be the right direction, but that was solely based on his instincts. And his instincts, especially in regards to direction, were fallible. "Where is that blasted cat?" he continued in his exclamation. It just had to run away, leaving him on his own in an area that he knew nothing about. Think, if I was a cat, where would I go? And how the hell can I find wherever that is? He scowled, annoyed. Okay, cats are fond of fish, milk, balls of yarn, mice and red dots. Ichigo donned a thoughtful expression and looked up into the sky. Well, the higher you are, the more you can see. So, I'll go up. He crouched low, and shot up into the air in a Reiatsu-fueled leap. Several hundred meters up, Ichigo reached the peak of his jump, and hardened Reiatsu under his feet, creating the platform that Shinigami tended to make in order to imitate flight. Standing still, he narrowed his eyes, and lifted his hand to shield the amber orbs from the sun. To the left, Ichigo simply saw countless buildings, and the same was true as to the right. That didn't look promising to the orange-haired Shinigami. In front, a walled, grassy area with a large building. Behind, an unwalled grassy area with a large building. Grass equals water. Water equals fish. Fish equals Yoruichi. At least, that's what Ichigo figured. So which of those two should he go to? Oh, the unwalled version was nearer to a straight, long and wide road. That looked much more promising to Ichigo than his other option, which was surrounded by buildings. Perhaps that would be the best bet to lead to this white tower. A main road would lead to the center of the Seraiti, surely. Did that outweigh how busy it would be, though, since the Shinigami'd probably frequent that road? He could just follow its general direction. Or fight, well, that would appease his hollow at least. This place really was big. He must have been moving for nearly an hour now, and in reference to the other landmarks, the grassy area had seemed to be in quite close proximity to the human. Ichigo had been moving toward his target area at a steady jog, this time on the ground to avoid being spotted jumping from rooftop to rooftop as he neared. Being seen too soon would be a bad idea. Who knew what the wooded area was? And even more importantly, who knew how many Soul Reapers would be there? Jumping right on top of an indeterminate number of them sounded like a very, very bad idea to Ichigo. As he neared the main road that he had seen before, Ichigo slowed his pace to a brisk walk. As soon as he saw the cluster of buildings on the other side of the street, the Ryoka would shunpo across, hopefully avoiding any risk of being spotted. From what he was told, those that would notice Ichigo flash-stepping were very limited. Yoruichi told him that out of the captains, he'd be seen by those of 1st, 2nd, 4th, 8th, and 13th. And of those, he'd stand no chance of defeating the majority in a fight, since it included the 4 oldest captains and an assassin. The cat had said that it could help prepare him for that eventuality, but, of course, he had to find Yoruichi first. Ichigo reached the break in the buildings, showing a clear path to a row of trees. He took a deep breath, and channeled Reiatsu into his legs, darting over the distance between him and the grassy area in a dull flash. Ichigo grunted, as his shoulder caught a tree. Damn, this is ridiculous. I could use it fine on the way here, and in combat it's easy as pie. So why do I keep messing up this blasted shunpo? He muttered to himself, glaring at the tree that he, somewhat illogically, blamed for the discomfort. However, the fact that it had snapped in half, and he had no more than a very mild bruise, told him that he did not need to extract any further revenge on the plant. Okay, let me see. He reoriented himself, having been thrown off his path by the minor collision, and faced away from the road, instead looking towards the slightly denser area in the forest. Water will be this way. He walked into the tree line, sidestepping past a particularly gnarly-looking tree, and continued on his way. All of a sudden, the Ryoka felt a pulse of spiritual pressure behind him. From the tree, he hopped to the side, dodging as a sharpened branch passed through the area previously containing Ichigo's body, and panicked, channeling a smaller amount of Reiatsu than his shunpo required, into his legs, and taking off at a run. Threw him against the strongest of people, and Ichigo Kurosaki would have no fear whatsoever about the consequences. Even if the Yamamoto guy Yoruichi had told him about, Ichigo would lose, but he'd be fighting something that he could accept. A sentient tree, though, that was slightly unnerving. Who knew what else could be in this accursed forest? He did not want to find out. Fucking creepy ass place. Stupid trees. Let's just get out of here and burn the evil forest from a distance. The pale Zanjetsu, for once, encouraged a retreat. Outside the woods that currently contained a powerful, yet fleeing, human Shinigami, a task force consisting of half the 10th Division's ranked members, and many more of their unranked, was gathered. At the moment, they were just waiting the allotted time required before they could abandon their cowardly 10th seat as a lost cause. Thankfully, this was his last chance. The irritating hippie would have been kicked out on his ass by Captain Hitsugaya long ago, had he not been from a minor noble family, who demanded he be given a second chance. Then a third chance. Then a fourth, fifth and sixth. This one, the seventh, was all that would be tolerated before he'd be transferred to Captain Soifon's division for personality adjustments. They would all be glad to see the pathetic man leave. Their collective thoughts, however, were well and truly disrupted by the sudden announcement of their soon-to-be target's arrival. The orange-haired invader, at a sprint, smashed through a clump of trees, obliterating them, and kept running full pelt towards the crowd he had shocked with his appearance. It showed just how stern a stuff the unranked members were made of that an odd, multi-layered scream resounded from them as they took in Kurisaki's ragged, and panicked, look on top of the fact that he made no indication that he intended to slow his approach. As Ichigo reached the Soul Reapers, he deemed the distance between himself and the living forest enough that he might be able to placate it, with a sacrifice, of course. He grabbed the nearest Reaper by the scruff of his neck and spun back to face the perceived threat. Here, take him, Devil Forest. I will not be eaten by a tree. Not this day nor any other. He threw the male into the small forest, and lunged at the next Shinigami, picking him up by his bicep. As a show of good faith, I am willing to give you another. I will avoid your forest if at all possible from here on out, if you will just agree to call a truce. The orange-haired intruder launched his captive into the trees again, and backed away, watching intently for any movement. Of course, this confused the hell out of those he was thinning out's herd. That forest was not a devil forest, after all. While they were considering the option of voicing this befuddlement, their explanation was given to them in the form of a green-haired man, dressed in the standard Shinigami garb, stumbling out of the trees with a triumphant yell. I found him, guys. And I led him here. Aoi Fujioka exclaimed proudly as he righted himself, and pointed his shikai, which took the form of a curved, wooden tree branch. He stood no chance against the might of my shikai. To illustrate his point, the ninth seat waved the branch he held, and a tree to his right shuddered and shook in response, before its branches sprung forward at the Ryoka he had captured. Ichigo easily sidestepped the projectiles, and a scowl spread across his face. That was you. Him. Of course it was. Cower before the might of the mighty Aoi Fujioka. A foot slammed into the gut of the green-haired man, and the others watched as Aoi was thrown into the very tree that he had been controlling moments before. Ichigo followed close behind him, and grabbed the man by his foot just as the tree splintered thanks to the Soul Reaper's body smashing through it. With a twist of his body, Ichigo flipped the man up and over his head, and Aoi slammed into the ground with a sick thud. Bastard, Ichigo commented, as his temper got the best of him in regards to this man. It hurt his pride that such a weak soul had managed to make him flee. Then, he turned to face the crowd, registering that the group consisted of a lot of Shinigami, all of whom had katanas, or similar swords, drawn and pointed at him. Oi, Ichigo, Ichigo asked, a smirk spreading to the hybrid's lips. You ready for some action? Fuck yes, let's kick some stupid Soul Reaper ass. Well put, Zanjetsu, well put. How about you, old man? I am ready, Ichigo. The second Zanjetsu confirmed. The crowd watched as the Ryoka in front of them swiftly drew his longest katana, followed by his wakizashi, and the higher-ranked among their number were ashamed to note that several of their number let out scared whimpers as the intruder's reiatsu spiked. Come forth, and pierce the sky, Zanjetsu. Chapter 5. Toshiro Hitsugaya to the rescue. Come forth, and pierce the sky, Zanjetsu. Ichigo let go of his moronic method of repression, and felt a wave of relief wash over him as his senses expanded, his reiatsu flooding the area around him. Those in proximity to him felt the pressure build exponentially on their shoulders, following which it mostly receded, and left them staring uneasily at the Ryoka in front of them. Only 2 Soul Reapers were known to possess a 2-blade release state, and the fact that they were also 2 of the most powerful captains did not bode well for the 10th Divisioners in this fight. The blades were intimidating to say the least. In the orange-haired man's left hand, rested the shorter of the 2. A pure black trench knife around the size of its owner's arm, with an enclosed handle that provided protection for Ichigo's hand as he fought. The sword in his right, however, drew more attention from the enemies he currently faced. It was almost as long as he was tall, and had a hilt that was the length of Ichigo's forearm, bandages wrapped entirely around the handle. The blade was, like its fellow, pitch black, and had a hollowed-out portion running along the back, from the base up to the midpoint of the blade's length. "You lot going to insist on fighting? 'Cause I'll give you one chance to turn around and run away. You have 5 seconds, Ichigo stated with a smirk, as he felt an excited energy to cut loose. A little bit, anyway. It was doubtful that any of them could rival Ichigo even at this level. And getting one of them to fetch their captain or lieutenant wouldn't be smart. What about if they brought reinforcements? No one. Okay, then, let's get started. Ichigo charged forwards, bringing the longer of his blades in a vicious arc, and sending a gust of wind strong enough to send half the unranked members to the ground in an instant. Had this been a serious fight, or had it been people he saw as deserving, Ichigo would have unleashed what his genuine attack, but that would kill the majority of his opponents, and he may become the target for the Shinigami's big guns. Instead, Ichigo sped towards the disoriented Soul Reapers, and the obsidian blades swung, each at a separate target. The 2 kimono-wearing males were cut across the shoulder, and blood sprayed from the wounds. Ichigo froze. That was far more blood than he had expected. Why would that quantity come from the cuts? Why was it so much more than the times he landed hits on his other sparring partners? The Zanpukto, he supposed, could have a different physiology, but why would Urahara be so different? Because he's stronger, Ichigo. When it comes to Shinigami, the more pressure you have, the less susceptible you are to being cut. Think of it as a form of armor that they can create from their own Reiatsu. Zangetsu explained. Really? Well, shit, he would have to be careful. He counted 4 that seemed to have substantial, though not all that significant, amounts of spiritual pressure. They must be the highest ranked. Most of the others seemed to have very little chance of faring better than the bleeders did. As a result, Ichigo flipped the blades over in his hands so that he now held them with the back of the swords facing outwards. This would, hopefully, avoid any serious injuries for his weaker attackers. No matter whether or not he had the support of his partners in wanting to spare them. The smallest, youngest captain, though he would explode at anybody that pointed it out, was currently moving at breakneck speed, barely stopping for a millisecond between shunpos. He had been sent word that the Ryoka had appeared in his division and was dealing fatal blows to his officers. Toshiro Hitsugaya, unlike many of his fellow captains, cared deeply for the men in his division. They were some of the few that had accepted his authority, despite his being younger than many of them and having the appearance of a child. He would not let them be hurt by an intruder that was, by all accounts, a force to be reckoned with. Unfortunately, Captain Hitsugaya had been in the 4th Division, checking on his injured 6th seat, when he received the alert. Even then, the fight had begun before the captain Flash stepped away from the medical division. That explained why, as Hitsugaya, followed soon by his lieutenant, arrived on the roof of his barracks, he was greeted by an extremely unpleasant sight. There they were, each and every member of the Ryoka hunting task force he had set up, lying on the ground unconscious with varying degrees of injury. 5 of them, Toshiro noted, had their torsos wrapped in bandages, and the last of these quintuple had an intimidating, even to one of Hitsugaya's strength, figure stood above him. Ichigo Kurosaki had sheathed his smaller Shikai blade. The trench knife now sat on his hip, but had to use Ichigo's kyber to bandage up his defeated enemies. That was why Hitsugaya's mind jumped to the worst conclusion. The orange-haired man had a massive, unconventional sword resting on his right shoulder, almost in the position to deliver a killing blow to the unconscious Shinigami. Sit upon the frosted heavens, Hirenmaru. An ice-made Chinese dragon slammed into the ground, just behind where Ichigo had been standing a second prior. Out of instinct, Ichigo had shunpoed away. Thankfully, this time he had only chosen to flash step a small distance. And so, he had not gotten lost. Thank God. Why are you here, Ryoka? Ichigo turned and found the source of that yell. A childlike Soul Reaper dressed in a white Haori holding a released Zanpukto that appeared to be affecting the area around wherever they were. That variation on the uniform meant that he must be a captain, based on what Yoruichi had told Ichigo, and so the human Shinigami made a conscious effort not to judge his opponent based on the boy's unimposing physical appearance. Nor did he let himself be distracted by the appearance of a tall, busty female, whose attire highlighted the fact, next to the ice Zanpukto-wielding captain. Did you have to go so fast, Captain? She complained to the white-haired boy next to her. Yes, I did, Matsumoto. If I had not, then our opponent would have executed 7th seat Takezo. He what? She turned, looking to the black-haired unconscious Shinigami to check her comrades were okay, and let out a relieved sigh when she found none of them to have been killed. Yes, I got here to find him stood over our 7th seat with his blade poised to kill the defenseless M. Whoa, wait a minute. I did no such thing. I'd just healed him, since the stubborn bastard refused to go down until I knocked him unconscious. The accused responded, calling to the captain and who he assumed to be his lieutenant. Healed him, Toshiro called, back in a confused tone of voice. Well, I healed him as well as I could. Really, that was just to the point that his wounds aren't any real danger to his health and then wrapping him in bandages. But I still tried. But why would you heal him, or any of us? Rangaku called over, having noticed the Ryoka's presence. Why wouldn't I? I had no need to kill him. As you can see, for the majority of them I didn't even use the edge. The two Shinigami shot each other a confused look, and began a hushed conversation. I thought that you said that the Ryoka was a bloodthirsty killer. Rangaku commented, having been told by her captain, not an hour prior, that they had found an entire village that the invader had passed through, slaughtered mercilessly. They had only stopped themselves from putting him down on sight because the captain commander had ordered Toshiro, and all the captains, that Kurosaki was to be caught alive if at all possible. That is what I was told, yes. And he matches the description that we were given. Matsumoto gave a frown, and replied with a question. Who gave you that information? Captain. The small soul gritted his teeth. Captain Ichimaru, he hissed. The busty lieutenant's expression turned to an angry frown, and the two reached a conclusion that he had, at best, lied to the council. It was unfortunate, but the teal-haired man may have done much more than that. There was something very wrong with him. Fine, Ryoka, you will accompany me to meet with the head captain. We will give this information to him to instigate a proper investigation into your crimes. Will you come peacefully? Hitsugaya asked, a stern tone to his voice. No. Sorry, but I don't see how that would end well with me. Ichigo shrugged. Besides, I'd prefer to avoid the Yamamoto guy as much as possible. I see. Hitsugaya's expression didn't change. Thankfully, I did not expect you to comply. Prepare yourself, Kurosaki Ichigo. I will not hold back. He exclaimed, raising his sword to prepare his opening attack. You want to fight? Ichigo asked, scowling. Usually, I would oblige you. But if we fought, I really doubt we wouldn't attract attention. So, I would like to say, I really am sorry. He raised the larger Zangetsu, as the kyber knife glowed blue. With a swing, he sent the, underpowered, Getsuga Tensho at the grouped unconscious Squad 10 Soul Reapers. The two others' eyes widened at the attack. While a few seated Shinigami may survive, the weaker ones would perish. That explained Hitsugaya's priorities in his next move. Rangaku, attack him, the captain ordered, as he appeared in front of the energy wave with a burst of shunpo. Right, she said in reply. Growl, Heineck wait, where'd he go? Well, Yoruichi wasn't there. But that's annoying more than anything else. The orange-haired teen scowled. I really don't feel like going all over the place trying to find her. I'll head towards Rukia, or where I think Rukia is, and hope that she's around there. Maybe if I get in a few fights, and cause a commotion, the cat'll find me. Ichigo shrugged, his patience having worn thin, and turned to set off in the correct general direction. He had only traveled a little way away from the 10th Division barracks, and so was aware of where the main road was. In the morning, the events of today had, apparently, taken longer than the human-turned Shinigami had thought. The sun was setting and, now that he thought about it, he was rather tired. Genria Sai Shigekuni Yamamoto, head captain of the Gotei 13 and the most powerful Shinigami to have been born in more than 1,000 years, was tired. So very tired. Tired of dealing with the day-to-day running of everything. The squabbles of people far, far younger than him, those that had too much energy to waste on non-consequential things. Things he just did not understand. He was tired of war, and also of peace. He wished there was something, anything that he still cared for. As it was, he cared for his children, not truly his offspring, but those he valued as though they were. He cared for the lives of those he protected. But he could not find it in himself anymore to understand why those youngsters ran around as they did, acting like they had too much to do, and too little time. Perhaps they did. Perhaps they would not live for the countless years he had. But he could not. He would not abandon his duty. The safety of his people mattered too much for him to bequeath the duty onto a lesser being. One day, there would surely be a time that he was needed to lead once more, and that, if he was granted one boon for his lifetime's worth of service, he would give his life for. Preferably protecting those who needed life more than he. At least, that had been his plan. What he had truly believed to be his destiny. Until this human came. This human, a species that, by all accounts, was supposed to be unremarkable, came with power that he could see was special. That was vastly more unique than any he had seen before. As Genria Sai Shigekuni Yamamoto stood silently over the still, sleeping form of Ichigo Kurosaki, his eyes, usually so full of apathy, so far from a true reflection of his true nature, burned bright. His hands clenched over the knot at the top of his cane, and, beneath the mighty beard he sported, his scarred lips twisted into an imitation of a grin. This boy, he had more potential than even the head captain himself when he was a youngster. Either he would be the greatest ally the Gotei 13 could possess, or he may be the very enemy against which Genria Sai gave his last, and greatest, effort. But the oldest Shinigami in existence knew one thing. The Kurosaki boy would do what he thought to be right. And once this was over and done with, and the explanation for such a harsh crime to be dealt to Kuchiki was explained, Genria Sai would go about convincing the youngster that the Gotei 13 was always striving to do what was right. Hopefully the boy would not sacrifice his happiness as his observer long since had. "Well, you look rather worse for wear," Ichigo commented, as he found himself greeted by the battered form of his inner hollow Shinigami. "Fuck you, ya rat bastard," Ichigo growled out, running his hand over a spot in his pure white clothing that looked to have 3 holes, about the proportions of what would be caused by being skewered by a trident. "I'm guessing you're blaming me for drawing Nejibana's attention to you, right?" Ichigo asked, having trouble keeping the smirk off his face. A fact that, based on his growl, Ichigo seemed to notice. "It's your own fault for interrupting, whatever that was. You can't seriously be that dense, King. After all, I'm a part of you, and I'm a pervert." "Dense? I'm pretty sure I am." Ichigo shrugged, "but I realize that the way she kissed me had connotations." "Is that what you would call it, Ichigo-sama?" a feminine voice asked, from behind Ichigo. The hollow let out a loud eep, and took off at a run. "Well, I think that it's a bad way to put it, but I'm really not sure why you did it," Ichigo said, as he turned to the female Zanpukto with a slightly uncomfortable grin. Nejibana seemed to visibly steady her restraint. "Apologies, Ichigo-sama. I did not intend to cross a line in my actions, and hope that you can forgive me." She bowed slightly in a formal manner. "Forgive you? You don't need to worry about that, flower," Ichigo commented, with a more somber expression. "I didn't understand it, but it was nice." He, unsurprisingly, reddened as he finished the statement. "Nice. I was hoping you would consider it more than nice." She pouted. "After all, mittens are nice." No, it was. I don't know how to describe it. I enjoyed it, but it was surprising." The blue-haired girl smiled softly at the, admittedly slightly awkward, compliment her wielder crush had given her. "I'm glad to hear it, Ichigo," she said, before returning to the topic that had been interrupted the night before. "But, I think we have more pressing matters to attend to. I feel I need to explain your Bankai to you." "Oh, yeah, you didn't tell me how I can achieve it, did you?" Ichigo replied, with a thoughtful expression. "No, I'm afraid my attention was pulled elsewhere before I could. Nejibana had an angry expression now, one that looked foreign on her ordinarily peaceful face. Ichigo didn't blame the hollow for running. But that kiss was my way of checking. I'd long since decided that the criteria for me giving you my Bankai form would be trust. And I trust you, Ichigo. I trust you to never use me, to value me, unlike so many soul reapers, and I trust you to live. To live for what is right, and to live for me. The same as I will live for you. And, so, we can truly be partners. Her expression shifted to one of real happiness. And, hopefully, not just as Zanpukto and wielder. Where in God's name is everyone? Ichigo wondered, very much confused. He had been traveling on the main road for a good few hours now, and yet he had encountered not a single soul reaper. He had been given a couple of theories by Zangetsu and Nejibana, the most promising of which was the idea that those other than the highest-ranked officers had been ordered to stay in their division barracks, but the absence made him uneasy. Like the calm before the storm. He had been flashing forwards every few steps for a half-hour by now, covering a small distance with each shunpo so that he would not lose control of the technique, and the massive hill that had become visible long before that seemed to be getting quite close. Before that, however, there was a massive set of stairs. One that, for reasons unknown, had the bottom portion engulfed in a thick mist. Ichigo slowed to a cautious pace as he entered the fog, deciding quickly that charging blindly into it would be a bad idea, to say the least. Especially since his senses were blocked, once again, by his makeshift suppression technique. This place just screamed trap and, so, Ichigo drew his, as yet, in his time in the Soul Society, untouched, katana, and advanced while maintaining his cautious pace. Oh, Ichigo wondered, it looks like the mist is clearing. A soft breeze had begun to blow through the courtyard-looking place that Ichigo was slowly moving through, allowing him to get a better view of the giant staircase at the end. With a whisper of steel on sheath, Ichigo drew Nejibana. There was someone at the bottom of the stairs. As the mist properly cleared, he saw one of the two from the human world. The one he had been beating with his non-Zanpukto before the quieter of the two stepped in and stabbed him in the chest. Something, however, told Ichigo that there was more to him than had been shown in their first confrontation. This is one of the ones who attacked you, Ichigo? Nejibana asked, her voice cold, as Ichigo's eyes narrowed at the sight of one of Rukia's kidnappers. That's right. Well, then, I would ask that you crush him. If not for yourself, then for me. Ichigo smirked, as his soon-to-be opponent stood and began to approach the Ryoka he blamed for his friend's sentence. It has been a long time, Ryoka. The red, pineapple-haired man began. Do you remember my face? The Shinigami asked, seriously. While I would rather forget, I still have business with you. Abarai Renji, Ichigo snarled, as the two foes, in a standoff. You remember, not only my face, but my name as well. The man gave a smirk. You really are full of surprises, and that is not even taking into account that you have somehow come back from the dead. After all, I saw Captain Kuchiki cut you down. Someone as weak as you could not possibly survive such wounds. Which captain was Kuchiki, then? Ichigo asked, filing the insult away for a moment. Captain of Squad 6. The squad where I serve him as lieutenant. Lieutenant? I haven't fought a lieutenant yet. Ichigo felt a grin spread across his face. This should be interesting. You cannot think that you stand on my level. After all, I can feel virtually no reiatsu coming from you. But I am glad you will fight. Because I am going to kill the one who stole Rukia's powers. He drew the katana resting on his left hip. This is as far as you go. While you still live, Rukia cannot regain her powers. Why would you care about that? You have just sentenced her to die. The pair charged, each swinging their blade in a vicious swing. Nejibana and Zabumaru collided in mid-air, pushing against each other in a test of strength. His eyes widening as he was forced back, Renji broke the stalemate first, forcing his opponent to break the hold with a shove against the blade. The red-haired man grunted with the exertion, as Ichigo took a step back and brought up his sword again. Nejibana sliced through the air towards Renji's ribs. The lieutenant brought his own katana up, blocking the blow from reaching its target, but sending himself flying in exchange. His path through the air sent him crashing into the wall across the courtyard, and Ichigo stopped, watching the area with caution, awaiting Renji's return. Bastard! The Shinigami growled at his opponent, as he climbed out of the newly made hole. The tattooed man gripped the katana with both hands and vanished in a burst of shunpo, appearing in front of Ichigo mid-strike, his Zanpukto veering towards the orange-haired human's throat. Ichigo ducked, avoiding the blow, and slammed his fist into the gut of his enemy. Renji gasped, a splatter of blood spraying from his mouth as he shot back yet again. This time, with Ichigo following in pursuit, his katana held in his right hand, while his left was still clenched into a fist. As his back slammed against the wall, and Renji had a second of reprieve, he felt shock as the only emotion present. When Ichigo's foot slammed into the redhead's side, he could not understand how the human had grown so much stronger in such a brief period. It was looking like he should use Howl, Zabumaru. Renji ran his hand down the length of the katana, the blade's width growing significantly from the hilt to the end, as the handle remained unchanged. The blade was slightly longer, and divided into 6 segments, each of which had 2 small blades protruding from the front and the back, the front being significantly longer than the reverse. Along the back of Zabumaru, it was solid black. With a swing of the large blade, Renji showed its proper function, the segments lengthening out, with stretchable thread connecting them, as a deadly whip toward Ichigo. The orange-haired hybrid quickly stepped to the side, avoiding the first blow, and brought Nejibana up hastily to block Renji's redirection. The red-haired man swung the lengthy blade again, and it came down in an axe blow, trying to puncture, and then tear open, Ichigo's shoulder. Bringing up his wakizashi, Ichigo knocked the attack off course, at which Renji growled. "Where did you get spare Zanpukto?" Ichigo responded with a slight smirk, glad that that was the conclusion Abarai came to. Had he realized Ichigo had more than one of his own Zanpukto, Renji would be far more panicked than he was at the moment. And, so, Ichigo didn't respond. Annoyed, Renji whipped Zabumaru back toward his opponent. This time, he was met by the standard-sized katana of his opponent, and Ichigo forced it off to the side, happy as he noted that the blade was retracting. As Zabumaru was recharged, Renji watched, eyes wider than normal, as he saw a release that he was sure he recognized. Ichigo held the dark blue hilted katana upside down, and began to twirl it, the blade glowing golden as it span. In a second, the katana had transformed into a far longer weapon. Nejibana's shikai appeared to be a trident at first glance, but also had elements of a spear and a halberd. Below the trident, a tassel, that was a slightly darker blue than the length, swayed slightly in the soft breeze. On the opposite end to the trident, a drill, instead of the traditional spearhead, sat. "Surge, waters and heaven, Nejibana." With a mighty swing, a wave careened towards the red-haired lieutenant, but was slow enough for Renji to dodge out of the way, Zabumaru finishing its retraction as he reappeared, only to notice that Ichigo had used the wave as cover to escape Rom's sight. "Where the hell is Heee?" The question was cut off as face of the trident slammed into his side, the flat of the 3 prongs sending the redhead flying. As though he was caught by an unbelievably strong wave. Well, as he noted while flying through the air yet again, that was exactly what had happened. A tidal wave carried him along, and smashed against the wall of the cliff off to the side of their battle. As Renji clawed his way out of the flood, he was pinned to the wall, and let out a gasp of pain, by Nejibana's 3 prongs stabbing through his right side. "Why you bastard?" Renji groaned out, as he locked eyes with Ichigo. "Why you? Save her." He slumped, blood pouring from him as Ichigo yanked Nejibana out of the now limp body. Both shikais faded away, as Ichigo resheathed Nejibana and drew the larger Zangetsu. "Pierce the sky, Zangetsu," he whispered, and set to work applying bandages. Chapter 6. Kenpachi Zaraki, Violence and Nakedness. "You'd have thought they'd build an escalator or something," Ichigo complained, as he reached the top of the massive set of stairs, having left Renji as he felt some more presences approaching. He'd be fine until they got him to their medical division. The human-turned-Shinigami flinched visibly, as he felt someone. He had a good idea just who his was, and was not looking forward to this confrontation. Apparently the captain of Squad 11 was one of the most powerful Shinigami in the Soul Society and, based on spiritual pressure alone, was potentially the most formidable. The only option, however, was to press on forward. His Zanpukto may differ in their opinions on many matters, but none of them would accept him running from a fight simply because it might be a little tough. And he, along with them, was confident that he could defeat the Kenpachi in combat. Simply because neither had formal training in most Shinigami skills, but Ichigo had more, unlike his soon-to-be opponent, abilities than just attacking wildly and with overwhelming force. This did, however, mean Ichigo could drop the constricting restraints that he had needed for his stay in the Seraiti thus far. Ichigo's Reiatsu enthusiastically sprang forth, relieving the pressure that had been pressing on his shoulders. Ah, Ichigo sighed, that feels better. Fucking constraints. He cracked his neck, and rolled his shoulders as he let out a satisfied groan. This wouldn't be a fight where he could afford to hold back, since his Benkei probably wouldn't be any help with a fighter that relied on brute force like Zaraki. Well, one of his Benkei wouldn't. The other. But that was rendered unimportant by Ichigo's excited suggestion demand. Oi, King, I wanna fight, I wanna fight. You owe me for releasing me just to heal Pineapple Head a mo ago. If ya don't let me fight, I might just, accidentally, strangle someone with my bandages next time round. Unsurprisingly, the pale Zangetsu was the only one that cared whether he fought or not. And, so, Ichigo obliged him. 0. Heen-chan. Yakiru whined, from her perch on her captain's shoulder. How much longer do we have to wait until Ichi arrives? They were currently sat on top of a building, waiting not too far from the Senzaikyu, the location that 11th Squad's third seat had suggested he might be going, given that that was where Rukia Kuchiki was being kept until it was time for her execution. I already told you, Yakiru, I don't know when he'll get here. Just that he will pass by this way at some point. Zaraki Kenpachi said, through gritted teeth. But I'm bored. We've already played your games, it's my turn. The Pinkett huffed and plopped her chin on her adoptive father's shoulder. But, I think that may be him. The captain gave a wicked grin as his sharp eyes caught sight of a tall, though not to his own degree, orange-haired, sleeveless Shihakusho-wearing figure. Across the male's back, a huge blade rested. It seemed, to Zaraki, that this would be a very fun fight. 0. Ichigo stopped, as he felt something change. The captain-class Shinigami had moved, apparently, and not away from the Ryoka. Yo, good of you to join me, Ichigo commented, calmly. The proverbial eye of the hurricane had moved to the spot not too far behind him. He scratched the center of his chest. Impressive killing intent you've got there. For a moment I thought you'd actually run me through with that there blade. Of course I joined ya. A deep rumble responded, with a chuckle. I think you can give me a good fight. You're Ichigo Kurosaki, yeah. That's right. Ichigo nodded, turning to face his opponent. And I'm thinking you'll be Kenpachi Zaraki, captain of 11th Division. Ha, yeah, that's me, and I'm his lieutenant, a chipper voice announced, as a pink-headed girl popped up from behind the tall captain. Her darker pink eyes were glinting happily as she smiled at Ichigo. Ichigo smiled back, but it wasn't quite as easygoing as hers was. Hey, I don't know about the morality of you Soul Reapers, but I'm not fighting a little girl. Said girl frowned at the implication. Kenny wouldn't do that. Kenny fights one-on-one, she said, with a slight pout. Good. Ichigo turned back to the bell-wearing captain. Shall we begin? Hee. Definitely. Yakiru, can you go wait on that building? He gave a half-hearted wave towards a building. Okay. Bye Ken-chan. Bye Ichi-chan. She vanished in a burst of shunpo. One thing I wanna know, Kenpachi pondered aloud. You seem stronger than Kuchiki said you were. You complaining? Hell no. If you weren't strong, how could I have fun? Zaraki pointed out. Nah, it just doesn't make sense since you haven't had that many fights since you got air. How do you grow so much stronger? And can I make some of my division do it so that they'll be more fun? It'll take quite a while to explain. I assume you don't care enough for me to take the time to tell you. But, no, it wouldn't work for your subordinates. Ah, that sucks. But you're right. I don't care enough to listen to the story. He shouldered his Zanpukto. I'd rather get to the fight. Yep, you know, I've been told to run away if I meet a captain. Oh, I'd hate to have to chase you down to kill you. Zaraki scowled. You won't have to. I'd never live it down if I did. Ichigo copied his opponent's stance, shouldering Zangetsu. Those swords. Zaraki nodded to the still-sheathed blades. You gonna use them? Probably not. No, but I'd feel naked without them. Huh, a shame. I haven't fought many dual wielders before, he remarked. Oh, maybe sometime in the future. The captain scowled, disliking that. TS's. So you don't wanna go to the death? I won't kill you, no. Ichigo stated. TS's. Fine, if you manage to survive, I doubt I'll feel the need to finish you off. It was true, he didn't often go out of his way to kill his enemies. But in exchange, I ain't letting you have the first move. He grinned sadistically, and readied the Zanpukto he had never spoken to. Kenpachi lunged forwards, his battered-looking katana swinging towards his target, who, for some reason, frowned visibly before bringing his kyber knife up to block the blow, being thrown back by the strength of Kenpachi's blow. The captain was, certainly, a strong one. Ichigo righted himself in midair, stabbing Zangetsu into the ground to remove his momentum, and prepared to retaliate with a snarl. He chucked the Zanpukto into the air, confusing his opponent greatly, and snatched a bandage out of midair. The blade reached his peak, and Ichigo yanked the makeshift rope harshly behind him. Immediately after, he span his hand in a wicked circle around his head. The blade span very, very fast, imitating a human invention that Kenpachi believed was called a buzz saw. All of a sudden, the rotation ceased, and the kyber knife was flung at the captain, like a gigantic and sinister dart. He raised his Zanpukto, in order to bat aside the blade, but found himself regretting that as he was forced to focus his attention on the action at hand, meaning that he did not notice that Ichigo had tautened the bandage he used to spin Zangetsu. As the blade was knocked aside, and the Kenpachi prepared to cut the bandage connecting it, he saw Ichigo was no longer in front of him, as his view was now unobstructed. In fact, the bandage led off to the opposite side to the blade. Leaping backwards, the kyber blade passed through the space Zaraki had just occupied. It flew back to the hand of its waiting wielder, and 11th Squad's captain grinned at the look of slight annoyance his dodge inspired in Ichigo. A shame, I thought you'd at least get nicked by Zangetsu. He raised the body-length blade again and leapt forward at the grinning captain. Their blades collided, and Ichigo added strength to what had been put into his first, this time resulting in the two reaching a stalemate. In this meeting, Ichigo broke the stalemate, pushing the captain back a few paces. This, however, just inspired his grin to grow, before Kenpachi lunged forward again, his Zanpukto aimed at Ichigo's shoulder in a harsh swipe. Ichigo stepped forward, the man's arm hitting him instead of the worn-out blade. Ichigo responded to the attack by slamming the bandaged hilt of his Zanpukto into the larger man's stomach, seemingly knocking the wind out of him and sending him back another few feet. Zaraki let out a bout of maniacal laughter. You must be strong. He leapt at Ichigo yet again, the nodashi he held whistling toward the orange-haired combatant's chest. But how strong are you? In response, Ichigo swept Zangetsu upwards, the two blades colliding in the unnamed, at this point, Zanpukto being knocked completely away from Ichigo, though it remained in Kenpachi's hand. The kyber knife slashed across the already scarred chest, cutting it open, though in a far less serious injury than just about anyone else would suffer from such an attack. Ha! Kenpachi roared, and moved faster than Ichigo had come to expect from the heavy captain. His blade pierced slammed into the kyber blade, and Ichigo stumbled back, before the nodashi stabbed through his right shoulder, inspiring a surprised gasp from Ichigo. Though it was not from the pain of such a wound. That voice. Ichigo's foot slammed into Kenpachi's gut, throwing the bigger man away and tearing the sword from Ichigo's torso. Kenpachi's eyes widened, as he felt the Ryoka's Reiatsu skyrocket. Come forth, Zangetsu, and the man attacked with vigor, a second blade was in Ichigo's other hand. Zaraki would have grinned as the difficulty increased further. The kyber knife blade slashed across his gut, followed by the trench stabbing straight through Zaraki's shoulder. While the blade was certainly smaller than its partner, a stab wound from it was far from insubstantial, even to the captain. As blood sprayed from the suddenly unplugged wound, the spiky-haired man's grin grew massive. Now this is getting good. Kenpachi's hand moved up to the right side of his face, and he gripped the eye patch with his unharmed hand. But don't grow complacent. The man tore the accessory off, and Ichigo's eyes widened. This was more Reiatsu than he had ever felt before. It had a very intimidating feel. The captain, ignoring the hole in his shoulder, charged forth again. The damaged blade made to bisect Ichigo, but was blocked by a suddenly glowing pair of unconventional blades. The Zanjetsus pushed the Nodashi back, and, again, Zaraki's grin widened. "Ha, I'm definitely not gonna kill you. This is way too much fun." Yellow Reiatsu built up behind him, and he raised his blade. "I can stop holding back." He gripped the hilt of his blade with his right hand. Not an image that would normally mean much, but this, also, exponentially increased the captain's output. "Nope," Ichigo said to himself. "Who knows what else he's got up his sleeves." The torrent of Reiatsu crushed the ground, and the air whipped around Kenpachi, cutting off the sound of his opponent's voice. Daburu. Two bright blue crescents of Reiatsu roared towards the 11th Division captain, running parallel to each other. What the? They collided with the captain, engulfing his form briefly, and preventing him from being seen, even by his ever-loyal lieutenant, who had just finished scaring off a messenger. As the light faded away, it showed a shocked expression in place of Kenpachi's grin. Two large wounds ran down Zaraki's torso, both enough to instantly render any normal person, even at full health, unconscious in an instant. As it was, the man stood gaping for a few moments, before the grin returned, his eyes close, and slumped to the ground, unconscious. Ichigo sheathed his smaller shikai on his right hip, and neared the unconscious man, bandages unwrapping as he neared. "Thank you, Ichi-chan," a pink bundle exclaimed, popping up, somehow unnoticed, on his shoulder. "Whoa, geez, don't do that." Ichigo clutched his chest. "Thanks for what, anyway?" "For helping Kenny have fun. It's been a long time since someone lasted so long in one of his games. Especially since you won." She hopped over to her pseudo-father and lifted him, in a surprising feat of strength, before vanishing in a blur of shunpo. Ichigo, meanwhile, realized his clothing was drenched with his blood, from the shoulder wound made so much worse by the blade's forceful removal. He focused his Reiatsu on that spot in particular, and felt his abilities drain him a little more than he already had been. The orange-haired Shinigami let out a yawn, and shrugged. He might as well find somewhere to take a nap. Opening parenthesis closing parenthesis opening parenthesis closing parenthesis opening parenthesis closing parenthesis opening parenthesis closing parenthesis. When Ichigo woke, his first emotion was, most definitely, confusion. This room was not where he had fallen asleep. The confusion was shortly followed by panic, and Ichigo leapt to his feet. This was furthered when he found that, as his hands went to his waist for one of his blades, they were missing. As his hand went to his lower back, his actions were interrupted by a masculine tone. "You were far less injured than I had expected, Ichigo." His head spun to face the cat that had spoken, and his hand dropped to his side. "I had predicted a marginal win against Kenpachi, if I am completely honest." Why was the feline's gaze on the wall behind Ichigo, when it was talking to the newly Shinigami? Ichigo glanced down, and found his clothing had been much more damaged in his fight than he had thought. Now, he was wearing little more than rags, and most of his body was covered only by bandages. It would be rather fortunate, soon enough, that his bottom still covered the vital areas. "Ah, sorry about my state of dress," Ichigo said, misinterpreting, unsurprisingly, Yoruichi's feelings towards how he currently looked. "Oh, and, by the way, Yoruichi, next time you should be more thorough in disarming someone." His sash, with the sheathed swords attached, sat next to Yoruichi. "What do you, oh, you mean Tabagarasu, I guess I forgot about that." The cat cocked its head in a more canine manner, and ran its eyes around the room. "Would you mind telling me where it is?" "I'd rather not." Ichigo looked around the room in which he had woken, too, and changed the subject. "Did you pick me up when I was napping?" "That is right." How?" He looked, confusedly, at the cat. "You really don't seem big enough to carry me here." "Oh, that is an easy task in my other form," Yoruichi said, simply. Apparently she didn't notice Ichigo's befuddled expression, until he voiced his confusion. "Other form." The cat responded with the same expression Ichigo currently displayed. "Oh, I never did show you my true form, did I?" There was a flash of Reiatsu, and a cloud of white smoke. Ichigo found himself in a very uncomfortable position. Crouched in front of the now sitting Shinigami human, was a purple-haired, beautiful woman. And Ichigo felt his eyes drawn, like any red-blooded male, to her nether regions. She was, for lack of a better way to be described, on display. And by on display, I mean she was very much naked. The dark-skinned woman smirked, proudly, at the change in expression of the boy she was, and she insisted to herself that this was what she was doing, teasing. Ichigo had a very obvious blush crawling up his neck, and his facial expression gave the impression of vacancy, as he forced his eyes further up her body, to look her in the eye again. From Ichigo's point of view, however, far more than that had happened. It wasn't exactly surprising that his hollow spoke up. He had often referred to himself as Ichigo's inner pervert, after all. Motorboat, 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 motorboat. The chant did not stop there, but Ichigo, muted, Ichigo until the bleached Zanpukto had gotten it out of his system. Of the other two male spirits, neither was anywhere near as obvious as Ichigo in their interest. Tobigorosa simply turned his attention to the events unfolding, and Ichigo couldn't say for sure if old man Zangetsu gave any response at all, but he thought the man, as a part of Ichigo, was at least vaguely interested. Lastly, Ichigo looked to the sole female spirit living inside his head, mentally cringing at the expected reaction, and found himself shocked. He had been dreading accusation, or jealousy, or something of the sort. His prediction was incorrect, evidently. Nejibana's interest, though far from Ichigo's level of obviousness, was quite clear to Ichigo. In fact, she seemed a little aroused. "I am a part of you now, Ichigo-sama," she replied to his shock. "While I am a separate entity, I am influenced by the things you enjoy." A disturbing thought occurred to Ichigo. "Wait, so your kissing me was really me kissing myself?" he asked, horrified. The Zanpukto let out a burst of musical laughter. "No, Ichigo, it's not that literal. What I meant was that I perceive certain things through your eyes, and so have grown to appreciate them. My feelings toward you are my own, don't worry." "Well, that was relieving to the orange-haired hybrid. I believe that you ought to speak to the naked one." Ichigo let out a chuckle, as he met Yoruichi's eyes, and she responded with an offended look. "Do I look funny to you?" She sounded genuinely offended, which surprised Ichigo. "No, not at all. You look," he trailed off, blush somehow increasing. "It's just that I believe you have earned a new nickname from my Zanpukto." "Oh," the goddess of the flash asked, relieved. They're probably going to be calling you the naked one from here on out." The teasing woman's cheeks only reddened a fraction of the color that was still present on Ichigo's, before she gained a slightly evil smirk. "Is that so?" She leant forward slightly. "Does that mean you want me to stay naked then, Ichigo?" Now, had Ichigo answered this question, he'd have spluttered out a few denials before regaining control of himself. But Ichigo had a bit of help this time, and felt the sensation of briefly being put in the passenger seat. "Nejibana, this time." Ichigo felt himself respond, lips curling into a smirk, cheeks returning to their natural color and eyes wandering. "I think I could get used to it, naked-san." His tongue darted out, wetting his lips. What? Now she was surprised. Yoruichi had fully expected a spluttering, embarrassed Ichigo. Not one that was so confident as to tease her right back. "Wait, naked-san." Ichigo, back in control, resembled his namesake once again. "Ichigo, was that one of your Zanpukto?" "Why yeah," Ichigo noted enthusiastically to assure her of this truth, and missed the shocked expression that Yoruichi was often finding herself wearing around the fascinating man in front of her. "Well, I guess I really shouldn't be surprised anymore," she mumbled to herself, shaking her head in a bewildered manner. Ichigo Kurosaki really was unique. "Hey, Yoruichi." "Yes, Ichigo, can you please put some clothes on?" He had, now, averted his eyes from the nude form. I suppose that you would be more comfortable if I did, wouldn't you? I always forget the insistence that humans have for covering themselves." She found a large collared sweatshirt somewhere, and donned it. "I am curious," Ichigo, the purple-haired ex-Shinigami began, doing her utmost to keep her voice level and finding it oddly difficult. Is that the first time you have seen a girl naked? Your reaction was rather extreme, after all. Yeah, that's right, he replied, head still turned away. She was surprised by how calm he sounded. Apparently the human-turned Shinigami wasn't as bothered by such a comment as most men would have been. That was a good thing. Hey Ichigo, hey, 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 the hollow in Ichigo's head demanded his attention. She's a cat, right? And you just saw her pussy. Ha ha ha, he found it far more humorous than Ichigo, or any of the others who heard. Well, Yoruichi began, with a smirk that hid what would have been a genuine smile. Would you like to see it again? Life is short after all. You should capitalize on the chance to see a hot young girl like me in all my glory. He turned to her, in time to see she had lifted her top, showing most of her body once again, and gave a visible flinch, before forcing himself to turn away, thanks to the volume of his hollow's affirmative. Once more, Yoruichi took the reaction badly, and would have questioned the reaction, but thought better of it. Based on his reaction earlier, Ichigo did find her attractive. She wouldn't worry, for now. In the future, though, she would do her utmost to gather additional data. Dash opening parenthesis closing parenthesis dash opening parenthesis closing parenthesis dash opening parenthesis closing parenthesis dash. I'd forgotten how uncomfortable it was to wear clothes. Yoruichi complained. She was now dressed in black, stretch trousers and brown shoes, a black undershirt and an orange jacket. You already said that, Yoruichi. Ichigo commented from his position walking next to her as they headed for what the mysterious woman had referred to as the ideal place to train for Bankai. She had shunpoed them to the entrance, but said that it was best for Ichigo to know where exactly they were, in case he needed a safe place while inside the Soul Society. Hey, Yoruichi, Ichigo began, receiving the workat's attention. You seem quite skilled in shunpo. He commented. Oh, that's an understatement, dear Ichigo. She said, with a smirk. Back when I was still living here, I was known as the goddess of the flash. She turned a glare on Ichigo as he snorted. Are you making fun of my title, Ichigo? In a way, yeah. He said, amusement heavy in his tone. You must realize why else it may be fitting to you. What do you? She remembered the other verb of, to flash. Oh, her cheeks, once again, reddened slightly at Ichigo's jibe. Well, I got it for being the most proficient in the use of flash step out of all the Shinigami. Ichigo raised an eyebrow, and likely would have asked about her origins, but was stopped by the dark-skinned soul continuing. Unless, of course, you would like to challenge me for that position. Yoruichi asked with a smirk, only for Ichigo to respond with a snort. You sound a little overconfident there, Ichigo. Oh, no, that wasn't a snort of confidence. The idea of me challenging you, especially if you were that talented in the art, is ridiculous. Plus, I'm not sure being called the goddess of the flash would really suit me. Why is it ridiculous? She ignored the second comment. Ichigo seemed remarkably skilled in it during his fight with Kazuki. Why would he think himself bad at it? Oh, I don't know. Probably because, when I'm not in a fight, if I can't see a clear path to where I want to go, I'm lucky to end up even going in that general direction. Let alone end up where I want to be. Yoruichi exhaled in a loud, annoyed manner. Yet another thing Kazuki didn't bother teaching you. She growled out, annoyed at her friend's idiocy. Well then, take off your clothes, it's time for us to get started. She said, turning to hide her smirk. My clothes. Damn, she thought to herself. He questioned it. I've yet to see anyone else shunpo without any clothes on. Why would that be needed to train? Ichigo noted that this was the most he had seen Yoruichi blush so far. No, that was a test to find out if you would obey me in this lesson. You failed. It probably wasn't the best way to deal with her embarrassment, Yoruichi was aware, but, nevertheless, she appeared next to Ichigo and the orange-haired man was sent flying with a kick to the head from one of the greatest Hakuda practitioners the Gote 13 had ever seen. Chapter 7. 2-on-1. On the floor of the training grounds, created more than a century prior by Kazuki Yukitake for himself and his longtime friend and comrade Yoruichi Shihoin, Ichigo Kurosaki lay, groaning. Gods, she's evil, he thought to himself, as he sat up and looked into the delighted face of Yoruichi, otherwise known, to him and his partners, at least, as Naked San and She-Cat. That was excellent, Ichigo. She exclaimed, proud of her, now stolen from Urahara, protégé. I've never seen someone able to move so quickly in such a short amount of time. Hell, I could count on my hands the number of people I know, even fully trained, that possess such speed. She was thrilled to teach Ichigo her specialties, though he was less than happy with her theory that, if she used Ho-Ho on him, it would help him master both Shunpo and Hakuto that much faster. It appeared to be true, he would admit to himself, but his learning had come at the expense of an unfortunate number of bruises. As well as, he would insist, at least one fractured bone. Oh, bite me, Yoruichi. Ichigo groaned out, then let out a yelp. Oh, geez. He rubbed his shoulder. I didn't mean literally. The golden-eyed woman gave him a saucy grin. You should be more careful in the future, then, Ichigo. After all, she leant in close to the suddenly blushing male. You taste so good, she purred, before continuing with a grin. Ha, I knew USTLL had energy to keep going. The human-turned Shinigami had vanished in a blur of Shunpo. Understand. Yoruichi finished her explanation. Yeah, I think so. Basically these Tenshintai dolls will take the form of Zangetsu as soon as I stab my swords into them, right? He got a nod of the affirmative. And that will allow me to fight them, proving to the old man that I'm strong enough to survive, and to Ichigo that I'll have fun with his Bankai. That's the gist of it, yes. The goddess frowned. But Urahara told me to warn you that. The warning she had been about to deliver was cut off as Ichigo drew two of HS blades, one the longest, being a good half-foot longer than the average katana, and the other the size of a wakizashi. Each had a pitch-black hilt, but the longer had a crimson guard, in the shape of a rounded corner rectangle, and the shorter a light blue in a proper rectangle. Likewise, the wakizashi had a sapphire, as opposed to the longer's ruby-colored pommel. I'm sorry Yoruichi, it's good of you to care, but this has to happen. If you need me to power the dolls, please just let me know. That wasn't it, Ichigo. They don't take much energy to keep running, as long as a Zanpukto will be occupying it. But, why do you feel you need to do this? You mentioned about the boost Shinigami get when they achieve Bankai, right? That won't happen for me until I get all of them. At her confused look, he elaborated. The old man and Nejibana agreed that I might try to force the last one if I got the boost before all my spirits agreed. And, apparently, that could kill me. He had a deadly serious expression, telling her that he was entirely serious. I beat Zaraki cause he was holding back, and I caught him by surprise with my last attack. If I want to rescue Rukia, I need to get that power. He was already strong, but if one of the senior captains came at him now, Ichigo would be in serious trouble. Other than a frown Ichigo didn't know the origin of. Yoruichi seemed to have accepted what he said, and gave a begrudging nod, before shunpoing away. Ichigo took a hold of the blades, handles once more and, with a sharp yank, both came free. The dolls glowed. Hello, Zangetsu. Ichigo unbuckled the belt sash holding his Zanpukto, his final blade added to it in preparation, and placed it softly down on a nearby rock shelf. Ichigo. The old man replied, with a nod. Hey, King. The hollow grinned. Ya ready? I wouldn't be talking to you out here if I wasn't. He ran his hand through his messy hair. So how are we going to do this? The hollow's grin decreased a little, and he shot a glare at his partner Spirit. Well, the old man's bein' boring. Apparently, you've gotta prove that you know us before we get to fight. He shrugged. But I do get to attack while you do that. That is right, Ichigo. But first, the old man waved his hand, and the remarkable power of Zanpukto was demonstrated. Hundreds of blades, all cleaver-like in shape, appeared across the rocky terrain. It was especially frustrating to Ichigo, because they were the form he had only been told of by the two, a form that they would have appeared as had he not known their actual nature. Apparently, he would have to fight them with the two's powers, for him at least, united. And this is meant to be difficult for me? Ichigo asked. Please. He shook his head with a more than a little bit of frustration. I would understand this if we were brand new to each other, but I have known you since I was a child. He vanished. The old man smirked, ever so slightly, while the hollow snorted. Told why, he was thrown off to the side, a kick having sent the man flying. Good, Ichigo. The trench knife appeared in Zangetsu's left hand, and he turned to face his wielder. Ichigo looked angry, something that unnerved even the man opposing him. It was relatively common for Ichigo to grow irritated, or to give a pseudo-angry reaction to mocking, but angry. That was a scary thought for a man with so many abilities, the majority of which could, in some way, cause a lot of pain to the hybrid's adversary. Resting on Ichigo's shoulder, there was a large kyber knife, as tall as its wielder at a little over 6 feet, though Ichigo himself was not aware that was his height, and with bandages wrapped entirely around, and flowing from, the guardless hilt. You will need, Ichigo, to have true control over our abilities. You do not, you will have to give up this mission of yours, and return to safety. I know. Shall we begin? He received no response from the old man, but this was enough to tell him that the spirit was ready. On the other hand, Ichigo appeared next to his temporary partner with a loud exclamation. Bastard! That was a hard kick, King. The pale version of Ichigo was holding his own kyber blade, though this was the one that possessed the hole from the base to the middle of its length. Despite his claims of the kick being strong, Ichigo had his ever-present grin still firmly plastered on his face. But, as you said, let's get ready to rumble. Ha ha, let's go. The hollow charged his wielder with a face-splitting grin. Ichigo was realizing something. These two, well, one of them at least, had a reason for requiring that they do this out in the real world. While Ichigo no doubt just wanted to fight, the old man must have realized that training, and by that he meant fighting, out here was far more productive than it would be in his inner world. It was exhausting, fending off the attacks of two masterful combatants, but very useful. While he could feel his energy depleting with every bout, it would come back, startlingly quickly, with noticeably more. As Ichigo was coming to this realization himself, another had long since noted the rise in his power. She hadn't expected this. Kazuki had told Yoruichi that there would be a slow, steady growth. Slow was not an adjective she would use to describe this. The idea of fighting to Zanpukto, it was laughable. She didn't know why she agreed to letting him do it, just that he assured her that he couldn't survive this trip if he didn't get past this very large hurdle. And yet, he was holding his own. No, not holding his own. Ichigo Kurosaki was winning. It may not be obvious, and Yoruichi sincerely doubted that Ichigo himself realized it, but he was achieving near hits at least as often as both of his opponents combined. To him, it must seem like he was on the defensive as often as he was the aggressor, but the idea of that was extremely impressive in itself. The two spirits were highly skilled, after all. Raw, Ichigo exclaimed, shoving the back of his kyber to break the hollow in his stalemate. The bleached man stumbled back a few feet, grin faltering, and found a cleaver blade whistling toward his shoulder. Only for the orange-haired man's blade to be stopped, mid-swing, by a trench knife Zanpukto. Ichigo ducked under a right hook from the, even now, composed old man, and responded in kind, swinging in an uppercut that narrowly missed Zangetsu's jaw. With a growl of frustration, Ichigo vanished with a light buzz, and appeared mid-swing behind the black-wearing Zanpukto spirit. Damn, he snarled, before smirking slightly. I almost got you that time, old man. The hollow had shoved Zangetsu out of the way, and his not quite as big blade was now blocking Ichigo's. Ichigo really was surprised, to say the least. These two were usually at each other's throats, but here they were working in perfect sync. Though, to be fair, they both were naturally parts of the same being, him. Wait a minute, if that was the case then. He was cut off by a pair of blades cutting towards him, one on each side of his head. Yoruichi was perched on a ledge above the fighting trio, having a mental debate with herself. Should she stop him here for the night? Day 1 was, after all, over. Ichigo could probably use some rest, and then to Santinu in the morning. The only thing was, neither he, nor the two he was fighting, gave any sign of slowing any time soon. Unsurprising, Ichigo had trained, under Urahara, for 10 days straight with next to no sleep, and this time he had had a nap before they began. The work had gritted her teeth with annoyance, she was looking forward to teasing her charge some more in the hot springs. The dark-skinned beauty let out an irritated sigh, and decided to wait a while longer. At least this was quite pleasant to watch. It turns out Ichigo had a habit of destroying his clothes in battle, even when he himself was unmarked. Fine, so I don't have the best self-control in the world. Sue me, Yoruichi thought to herself, as she silently observed Ichigo pondering the wonders of the spring water. As the orange-haired hybrid decided to try drinking it, she spoke up. "How's the water, Ichigo?" The man, for she did not like calling him a boy, nor did he like being referred to as such, froze, suddenly very aware of the fact that he was naked. He gave a vague approving noise in response, which elected a chuckle from the purple-haired soul. "Oh, well, Ichigo, you make it sound so good, that I think I'll join you." "Whoa, what? And no." Ichigo turned, intending to stop her, and found a half-naked flash goddess to greet him. "What the hell are you? Did you just pants ga?" He buried his face in his hands, finding this to be the best course of action for him to take, and heard a light splash. "Oh, loosen up, Ichigo. Don't be such a prude." He could hear the smirk in her tone. You really can't blame him for peeking. He was a heterosexual, red-blooded male after all. "What, are you a little disappointed, Ichigo?" The masculine voice of her cat form questioned, swimming in the water. "You are, aren't you? You pervert." Ichigo grumbled something about drowned cats under his breath, and voiced a question he had had for a while. "Hey, Yoruichi, I've been wondering for a while, why does this place look so much like Urahara's basement training ground?" The feline turned to him with a raised eyebrow. So you caught up on that, did you? We did our best to model his human world training ground after this one. Nostalgia, I suppose. You see, we built this one when we were kids." Ichigo let out an impressed whistle. That was quite a feat. "In order to have somewhere secret to play. When we got older, he joined the Gote 13, and I the Stealth Force, but we still came here in order to hone our skills." So you mean you two were He had turned to her, to find the cat had transformed, somehow without him noticing, back into a naked and glistening, purple-skinned goddess. His own sentiments were echoed inside his head. The hollow was too distracted to make even a single comment. Well, she caught Zanjetsu off guard. Quite the feat. What sounded like a satisfied growl purr came from Tabagarasu. And Nejibana remained silent. She had been the only one to see this coming, embarrassingly. Yoruichi obviously enjoyed teasing Ichigo. Nejibana was also the one to keep Ichigo's blood flow from reaching the two areas her wielder would not want it to go. Though she let a little of it go to his cheeks to give him what she considered to be a charming blush. Even if Ichigo simply saw it as a little less embarrassing than a full-fledged one. For over a minute, each second passing by agonizingly slowly, Ichigo and Yoruichi were unmoving, Ichigo unable to tear his gaze away, both because he was frozen and because Ichigo was putting up as much resistance as he could in order to see this sight as long as possible, and Yoruichi because, well, she didn't quite know why. But it might have been hinted at with the slow, deliberate movements with which she slid into the spring. Right, Ichigo cleared his throat and found his previous train of thought. Clogs was a soul reaper. I was wondering, it didn't make sense for him to be human and have a Zanpukto. And the two of you know so much. He scowled. I want to know, Yoruichi, about the guy who trained me. Who is Urahara? He's the former captain of Division 12 of the Gote 13. She looked her newfound pupil in the eye. Just the same as I was captain of the second. On top of that, Kazuki founded the Department of Research and Development and served as its first chief. She smiled slightly at the look of shock on Ichigo's face. Wow, I had no idea you were such hotshots, you two make quite the couple. He made what he had thought was a simple statement, but knew he had gone wrong as soon as he observed the look of shock, and then slight anger, for reasons unknown to him, on her face. Who said we were a couple? She snarled at the misinformed human Shinigami. Little help, you guys. He requested. I recommend apologizing, and assuring her that you meant no offense to her with your presumption. The old man advised. A logical suggestion. Squeeze her tits, please. For me. The hollow spoke up, hopeful. Ichigo really doubted that would help, and so he ignored the advice. No, Ichigo, you should tell her. I am sorry if I caused any offense, Yoruichi. I was certain that one as beautiful as yourself would have long since found and married the man, whomever that man may be, of your dreams. But I now understand that the very notion of you finding love with a mere mortal is laughable. Compared to you, there truly is no other who could hope to be so deserving of the title of goddess. Yoruichi's eyes went wide, and she stared at Ichigo in shock. Now, had anyone else tried to flatter her as such, the ex-assassin would have laughed them off with ease, and teased them in return. Ichigo, though, as he said that, there was something in his voice, a complete honesty that reassured her somehow. That told her to believe him. And, if this had been any other time, to put her utmost faith in the strange man before her. And so, Ichigo got to be the first one in well over 100 years, perhaps ever, to see Yoruichi Shihoin light up like a lantern. 2 days remain, Yoruichi commented to herself, as she watched the sun rise. Ichigo's progress, it's amazing. I wish I knew just what it took to achieve the release. Urahara said he would need to subjugate the two of them in order to forcibly gain it. But two of them, I don't know if he can do it. Her brow creased into a frown. We had a 25-day grace period when I gathered my information, before Rukia's execution. And we've used up less than I had anticipated. Far less, in fact. But the cleaner distorted the timeline for us, so we now have 8 days left. The only thing is, any training I could do in that time would be largely useless to Ichigo. I know he can beat the Zanpuktos, but how long will it take? She trailed off, a worried look on her face. But, I believe Kazuki. He said that Ichigo's abilities were far greater than his own. Even if Ichigo has 2 enemies to face, I do believe that he will succeed. Tomorrow. How strange it was that Ichigo only heard that single word. Yet he understood the conversation. It made no sense whatsoever for his ears, even if they were sensitive, to be so selective. And even less for Ichigo's mind, not one of the others, nor one of the mysterious happenings that just happened. Renji had arrived midway through one of Ichigo's clashes. They were too far away even for spiritually enhanced ears to pick up the conversation between the redhead and Yoruichi, yet he did. Ordinarily, he would have wondered if that was a sign that his power was increasing. Whether he was nearing the completion of this. But he didn't. His partners didn't, either. No, the two Zanjetsus were staring, one visibly nervous, the other with the smallest of smirks, at their wielder, as his blade shook. Once more, he vanished. Saw, Renji said, or at least, that was the closest Ichigo could come to understanding his noise. The tattooed man was now pressed against a rocky wall, a hand wrapped around his throat. Did you just say, tomorrow? Tomorrow at noon? Renji could have sworn the Ryoka's eyes were brown before. Answer. Yes. The, possibly Lieutenant gasped out. That was when Rukia was, all of a sudden, set to be executed. The red-haired Shinigami dropped to the ground in a heap, just as he heard a slight buzz that he couldn't place. Had he seen Yoruichi's, it would have been clear that she could place it. Well then, Ichigo's garbled tone rang through the cabin. We best kick this into high gear. Ichigo, a stunned, former captain of Squad 2 spoke, voice barely above a whisper. Next to her, an even more amazed Shinigami stared at the orange-haired man's heavily bleeding form as he stumbled past them, his walk an uneven gait as he used immense willpower to stay standing. Ichigo had terrified her. She was Yoruichi Shihoin, goddess of the Flash, greatest practitioner of Ho-Ho in the history of the Soul Society, and she had been afraid. She considered crying, she considered screaming, she considered running to Ichigo and checking his wounds. Then, she settled on an undignified giggle. Oh, she could not wait until Hiyori met him. As Ichigo pitched forward, into the hot springs, she smirked. They would have time, now, to get that from where she left it. It would be fun. Maybe she'd even get to run into her old protege. It would be nice to catch up. I still don't see why we need to fly. Ichigo commented, as he and Yoruichi appeared for an instant, stood atop one of the many buildings in the Seraiti. How high can the execution stand be? They vanished in a burst of flash step again. It isn't a matter of height. Yoruichi replied. It would be fine, normally, to shunpo to that height. But it is made of the same material that the outer wall is. Seki Seki stone disrupts the use of spiritual powers. We would fail to reach the top without my Tentoken. Plus, unfortunately, at this point in time, it is a unique item. We have to get mine, else we won't succeed in your mission. Huh, that's a shame. I guess we'll have to be quick, right? He glanced at the sun, partway through its rise to the peak. Sorry about sleeping so long, again, he said, sincerely, as they neared their destination, but was unprepared for the snort he got in return. I've got to say that I'm amazed you recovered as fast as you did. I would have been fine coming and getting it myself, you know. Ichigo simply shrugged. He might as well come along in case there was trouble. I mean, seriously, Ryutsu deprivation and blood loss are pretty serious. I still can't believe how violent those two were. Especially the older one. He seemed calm and collected, but he stabbed you right through the chest. You could have died from a wound like that, Ichigo, she said, a concerned expression marring her normally cheerful face. I already said, Yoruichi. That was my fault. I didn't want to get Bankai unless I deserved it. Defeating them properly convinced me I was. Zangetsu really wasn't to blame. Yeah, I still think that. Oh, look, here we are. That's their symbol, right? Ichigo pointed at a pasque flower, and received a nod in return. That's right, Ichigo. You stop here. I will signal if I need you to intervene. The goddess of flash vanished, and Ichigo shrugged, dropping to the ground to sit and wait. She didn't tell him the signal, but hopefully he would be able to tell what, exactly, that was. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment and subscribe, as well as checking out the author on fanfiction.net.